Morning.
Morning.
Morning, we're back.
Morning, Meryl.
Morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, morning again.
Well, welcome to the meeting of the combined meeting of all scrutiny committees. Please can I ask for nomination of a chairperson for the meeting today?
Nominate Cheryl Green.
I'll second that.
Second.
Would you like to take the chair?
You're on
Don't
mute,
meet
Cheryl.
Chair, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
I knew I'd do that. I knew I'd do it at least once. Welcome all members and officers to this combined meeting of all scrutiny committees which, due to government advice to the public to practice social distancing, will be held virtually, with committee members and officers accessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Please can everyone ensure that all mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda on Friday the 15th of January 2021. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point, but I would ask, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help minimise any background noise and interference and ensure that the connection remains as stable as possible. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. If any members or officers wish to speak, to raise a point or question, they should use the instant messaging icon on the bottom left of the Skype window and type speak. I will come to you in the order I receive requests. Please do not use the IM to chat or enter questions or comments. I will now ask the scrutiny officer to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. Officers are asked to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak. Please ensure mics and cameras are switched off when not in use. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Andrew Rees, Democratic Services Manager, and I shall now announce the names of the members present this morning. They are Councillor Alex Williams, Councillor Hussain, Councillor Amanda Williams, Councillor Pachella, Councillor Cheryl Green as Chair, Councillor Keith Edwards, Councillor David White, Councillor Danisha Patel, Cabinet Member, Councillor Howells, Councillor Hugh David, Leader, Councillor Gebby, Councillor Janice Lewis, Councillor Spanswick, Councillor Blundell, Councillor Julia Williams, Councillor Kay Rowlands, Councillor Ken Watts, the Mayor, Councillor Lynn Walters, Councillor Martin Jones, Councillor Mike Clark, Councillor Mike Kern, Councillor Nicole Burnett, Cabinet Member, Councillor Nora Clark, Councillor Pam Davis, Councillor Richard Collins, Councillor Rod Shaw, Councillor Penhale Thomas, Councillor Dendy, Councillor Beadle, and Councillor Foisey, Councillor Gifford, and Councillor Phil White. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Item 2 on the agenda, apologies for absence, and that will be Mary Lawrence.
We've got apologies from Councillor Bridie Sedgbeer, Paul Davis, Elaine Venables and Caroline Webster, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor John Paul Blundell.
Sorry, Chair, it's not a declaration of interest, it's an apologies for absence. Councillor Stuart Baldwin.
Thank you for that. Councillor Janice Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's to put the apologies for Councillor David Lewis, please.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
Right. No one has indicated any declarations of interest. So we will move to item 4 on the agenda. And I'm going to ask the Interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change to present the report. Over to you, Jill. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask the question this morning that I presented the NTFS yesterday, and I have assumed that we have the same people here today and wondered whether you wanted me to go through the NTFS overview again, or whether you wanted to move straight to scrutiny of the services.
I'm not sure if we're exactly the same people as yesterday, Jill. There may well be members that are here today that were not here yesterday. Okay. So perhaps you could do a very condensed overview. I know it's a lot, and we really do not want another marathon like yesterday, but if you could just perhaps pick out the salient points that you'd want to highlight to members, and then members can always ask questions if you haven't covered what they want to know. Okay, thank you, Jill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, Jill Lewis, Chief Officer, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. So what you have in front of you is the MTFS for the years 2021-22 to 24-25. Which was presented to Cabinet in draft on Tuesday. And this is the opportunity, obviously, for scrutiny members to look at that in some detail and to ask questions. The MTFS obviously supports the 3 wellbeing objectives and identifies resource priorities for the next 4 years. I think one of the important issues in the MTFS is the impact of COVID, the additional cost pressures and loss of income, and we've been very successful so far in getting money back from the Welsh Government, from the Hardship Fund, to help with that. But for the longer term, in terms of the Council, obviously in terms of restart, recover and renew, we don't know how much money will be available, and therefore some incredible challenges will persist for the future. The one thing I said yesterday, and I'll repeat, I think, today, is that the one thing that I'm certain about in the MTFS is that there's uncertainty. And we really do not know, any of us, I think, what the future holds and what the pressures on the Council may be. Along with, I have to say, the opportunities that some of the changes will present. So we've got pressure on loss of income, car parking, leisure, rental, holidays, CTRS that came to Council yesterday. You heard me say that 2.7 million short. Housing, the new regulations, TTP, PPE, vaccination, social care, which we're talking about this morning, education, and others. So it's much more challenging than usual. We've made 25% of the Council's budget in savings, 68 million, in the last 10 years. And obviously it becomes increasingly hard, and that's what we're here for this morning, to look at some of the savings proposals and the pressures that face the Council. But we are a lean, fairly efficient Council, and therefore it becomes incredibly difficult to find more. You'll be aware of the funding. I won't go into that in any detail. The council tax fund's about 30% of the budget, less than most people assume. So increase and decrease in council tax, whilst not a minimal effect, doesn't have the sort of effect that you would imagine. So wherever possible, obviously, the MTFS looks to bring in savings and tries to minimise the effect on services, so that in the papers in front of you, you've got efficiency savings, property savings, service savings, and they're all set out between 412 and 417. I said yesterday that the MTFS is set, obviously, within national economic context and guidelines, and obviously includes the principles governing the strategy. The settlement from the Welsh Government this year came out late, obviously on the 22nd of December. So this is the draft budget that you have in front of you today. The settlement gave 3.8% across Wales in terms of 22 local authorities, with huge variances actually within that 3.8, some down nearly as low as 2 and others as high as nearly 6. Thankfully, Bridgend was a net gainer in that, and our settlement came out at 4.3%, which is obviously significantly better that we were expecting. But I do still urge caution. The pressures are immense coming forward on the budget. Very little movement in terms of the settlement, just a few changes in the grants, sustainable waste management going down, childcare offer going down, and the transformation funds that Claire may well refer to this morning going down, and up on the social care workforce and the minority ethnic, Gypsy, Roma, traveller learners. We're also expecting 766 million from the consequential review from Westminster, but we obviously don't know how much of that will be destined for local government. So at 4.7 is the current financial position, which was reported to Cabinet as Q3 on Tuesday. 4.8 is the development of the MTFS. 4.9 sets out the principles, and you'll recall, particularly if you're on BREP, that there are 13 of those. 4.10 sets out the assumptions on council tax, an increase of 3.9%. The assumptions in the MTFS were 4.5, but going forward remain at 4.5. And 4.11 to 4.12 sets out the resource envelope and the risks. So I think that's a very, very brief. Oh, table 6, most importantly, shows the draft revenue budget for 21-22. So I've tried to be incredibly quick on that, Chair. I've probably forgotten an awful lot. The budget reduction proposals for 21-22 are identified as Appendix B. And obviously, the proposal this morning is that we go through the savings proposals and the pressures. So I won't dwell on that any further. So happy to take any questions. That was as brief as I can make it.
Right, thank you for that, Jill. I know most of us were certainly there yesterday, but it's nice to just have a refresher. We'll go through the budget pressures first, and my first question is from Councillor Rod Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jill. It's an observation, really, if I may, that we have two tables, one of pressures on the budget and then some of the budget reductions identified. So for social services, we have pressures indicated, proposed, if you like, of £5 million, yet on the budget savings, the total there is about a tenth of that. Now, I know social services is a reactive department, so we have to work according to demand, if you like, but we're also used to that department overrunning by some £2 million. Would you care to comment on the disparity between those two figures? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rod. Do you wish to comment, Jill?
Jill, you're on mute.
Sorry. Mark, are you coming in on this?
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, I wasn't sure if Claire was going to answer that. So I'm quite happy to start off, Chair. We know that social services and wellbeing is a demand-led service, and there is and has been constant pressure on that budget, and that's pretty much national. That's not just Bridgend. There are indeed lots and lots of pieces of work in progress to control that demand wherever possible. But obviously, this is one of the services that's going to be severely affected by COVID. But there are opportunities, and I think Claire will talk about those a little bit more in terms of the way that we've developed the service through COVID. And that should enable, I think, more efficiencies to be delivered. But obviously, that will take time. The workforce is under pressure. They have had significant press, I think, in terms of their parity with health, and that it's a service that really is under strain at the moment. So I think the savings and the pressures are not necessarily linked. They are for different reasons, and I think that's important. So there will continue to be pressures, but that doesn't stop the opportunity taken to deliver savings.
Thank you, Jill. Claire, do you wish to come in now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And just to build on what Jill has said there, this year has been a year like no other for all of us, but for social care and social services and wellbeing in Bridgend in particular. And I think, as members will know very well, social services is a demand-led service, and we are responsive to the needs and statutorily responsive to the needs of individuals and to the communities we serve. But for a number of years now, certainly since the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, we have been doing things very differently. Practice has been transformed in that we work in a strength-based way. We focus on what people can do, and even people with very high level of needs for care and support, we support them to be connected into communities and to have their outcomes met in ways which don't mean they're very reliant on quite traditional care and support services. So that has enabled over the years a shift in practice and in provision of services. So we've seen reductions in the number of people who have come into care homes. We've seen reductions because we've got a very large investment in reablement services in the people who are supported to live independently at home with less formal care and support. And we've seen, and one of the savings is in this area, we've seen opportunities to provide daytime occupation and opportunities for people very, very differently. That doesn't mean that the pressures go away, and the pressures there are in a number of areas. So they relate both to the quantum of service that we need to provide, and that's linked to the demographics that we have as a county. We're obviously an ageing population, and ageing, whilst it's very good, brings with it an increased requirement for some of us for care and support, and that's reflected in the budget pressures. The budget pressures also relate to the cost of service provision as well. So as Jill said, social care workforce have been at the fore of the response to the pandemic, and the value of the workforce, I think, has been recognised, and it's right and proper that that is recognised in the budget pressures in terms of the uplifts which are there within the pressures. We've also, as Jill has said, been increasingly innovative and creative in terms of the way that we have supported care and support during the pandemic. For a number of years since the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, we have been required to promote the use of direct payments to give people more choice and control over their own care and support. And increasingly through the pandemic, we've been able to use direct payments very flexibly for both children and adults with care and support needs to support people to control their own support needs. So those are reflected in the pressures, but we will continue and building on a lot of the innovation and creativity and strength-based practice that we've seen during the pandemic to be transformative in terms of the way that we practice and provide services. So therefore, we not, as the overarching paper says, going to continue to do everything the same as we always have. We'll continue to build on strengths, and that enables us to do things more cost effectively, which is why we've got savings in terms of practice and in terms of day opportunities highlighted in the MTFS.
Thank you very much, Claire. The Cabinet Member Nicole Burnett would like to come in now.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously Claire can explain it far better than me, but I just want to give everybody assurances from my perspective. Obviously, I've taken over the portfolio. I've spent a lot of time talking to officers and staff, and trying to get to grips with this enormous sort of directorate. But I just wanted to assure you all that we are in a period of transformation, and it's very positive transformation within social services, in both adults and children's services. Our officers are very forward thinking, very experienced, and are working on evidence based changes which have only really started and we haven't really seen the benefit of. And the sort of savings, so to speak, that have been identified are also going to be very positive in terms of how the service runs and how we work towards the person-centred approach that we all want to have. But I mean, this is a very difficult situation in terms of income. There are new grant funding streams coming online all the time from Welsh Government. One's just entered my mailbox this morning on secure accommodation for vulnerable children. We have to respond to, we have to apply for them. It's that reliance on short-term grant funding, and we're in the process of organising ourselves so that we can respond to what the new funding priorities are going to be from Welsh Government. So it is all really up in the air, and the team are responding to pressures that are completely unknown. And of course now, due to long COVID, we're going to have social care pressures from much younger adults who are recovering from long COVID. We've just got no idea what the demands on the service are going to be. So thanks for letting me speak.
All right, thank you for that, Nicole. Jane Gebby, you indicated to speak. Is this on this particular issue?
It is on this particular issue,
okay,
yes.
Then Jane, carry on.
Please forgive me if I can take the Cabinet member and the Director back to the budget pressures. You make reference, SSW3, you make reference to the national living wage. Could you confirm whether this is the real or the foundation living wage, and whether all terms and conditions of all commission services will be implemented under the Ethical Procurement and Workforce Partnership Council, please?
Shall I come in?
Yes, please, Claire. Yes, just answer when it's obvious yourself. Don't wait.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is based on national living wage as set out in the paper. As Councillor Gebby, as members will know, the remuneration of the social care sector is an issue which is receiving very significant attention from Welsh Government at the moment, and indeed a white paper was issued last week for consultation, which set out some of the challenges which the social care sector has faced and has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 period, and recognising that there needs to be some step changes in the way that those services are commissioned going forward, in order to address some of the challenges which the sector faces. The work that the frontline workforce do has never been more valued and more valuable, and I think at a national Welsh Government level it is recognised that there needs to be some sustainable investment into public services in order to address the issues that we're facing. We have a national strategy for health and care workforce, which was launched, I think, last year. The year's blurred a little bit now, it may have been the year before, which talked about working towards parity of esteem with the NHS within a 5-year period. That's a very, very challenging proposition, isn't it? Because from where the sector started, I can give assurances about the way that we commission services here in Bridgend, that we work very largely to the principles that are set out within the white paper, which has been launched for consultation, in terms of the relationships that we have with the social care sector and with providers, which have placed us in a good position to work together to respond as effectively as we can to the challenges that COVID has brought to us. But I think we do understand that at a national level there are some significant policy issues which remain unresolved, and which the white paper I think will start to garner our views on in terms of resolution.
Thank you for that, Claire. Jane, you wish to come back?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. That isn't actually, you haven't actually answered my question, please, Director. I actually asked you if you could guarantee me that all our commission services, I understand that you can't alter contracts retrospectively, but we are a foundation living wage, a real living wage employer. We are accredited. So therefore, all staff and all contractors should be paid the foundation living wage.
Claire, are you able to respond to that?
I am able to respond that at the moment I can't guarantee that. That's not what's reflected in the MTFS proposals that are being scrutinised this morning. The MTFS proposals are based on national living wage.
Thank you for that, Claire. Well, Jane, you had your answer. Do you wish to come back again?
Yeah, it's really not satisfactory, Chair. We need to be one or the other. We can't be in the middle.
That's a fair comment. Right, we'll move on. That was on SSW3. I've got John Spanswick on SSW2 for clarity you wanted.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have got a comment as well, a question on SS3, but if I can do two first. It's SSW2, and it's a question that was put on more than one occasion to the previous director regards direct payments, because the narrative relates to direct payments but also talks about increasing complexity of cases, but we only have one figure. We had this yesterday, one figure, but it relates to more than one thing. So I'm not sure how much of the 479,000 relates to direct payments. The previous answers I've had in the past about increase in direct payments would be that we had gone decrease in staff, and that there wouldn't be an increase in costs. So 479,000 split over two issues, it appears to be, and we need some clarity on these figures. Having one figure that covers multitude of areas needs to be clarified. How much of that relates to direct payments? Should I comment on SS3 as well at the same time?
Well, perhaps the director would prefer to respond to that one, and then you can carry on with your SSP.
Yeah, the entirety of the pressure relates to direct payments. The reference to complexity is because, in addition to an increase in the quantum, what we're seeing is complexity of casework as a consequence of a number of things, really. One is that the usual solutions that would be available to meet people's needs haven't been available during this COVID period, continue not to be available. As you know, Councillor Spanswick, we've got a big focus on connecting people to naturally occurring opportunities within their community to support independence and well-being in that way, and that's been severely restricted during the COVID period. And we've seen particular pressures for part of our population. If we think about the pressures on people with disabilities, the pressure on families supporting individuals individuals with dementia, family supporting children with disabilities, you know, the challenges face mean that we've had to be really flexible within the capacity and the capabilities we have, and that's led to an increase in the use of direct payments, which gives that flexibility to individuals to secure their support in a way which works for them with all the constraints that we talk about, and also an increase in the quantum. So I think the descriptor is correct. It's about both an increase in the numbers of direct payments and the complexity of needs which those direct payments are supporting to be met.
Thank you, Claire. Do you wish to come back, John?
Thank you, Chair, for that. Yeah, but because it just looks like it appears the answer that in the past has perhaps not been fully explained, and that is a recurring payment. It doesn't show as a recurring pressure in the chart, but it is a recurring amount. I take it. It's in the recurring column, but then it doesn't spread across future years.
Yes, it is a recurring pressure.
Yeah. Can I quickly then add the SW3, Chair?
Chair, could I just explain that it won't go over each of the years? It's put in once and it goes into the base budget. So otherwise you'll be cumulative. You'll be, if you put it in every year.
So it's not cumulative. That's what you're saying, Joe.
Well, you wouldn't be putting the same amount in on top of it each year. We're putting in that much, and that rolls forward in the base budget, Councillor Spanswick. Otherwise, we'd be putting in 479 plus 479 the next year, plus 400 the following year.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Jill. All right, John?
Yes, Chair, SS3 confuses me all when it comes to SSW3 now, though. I don't know whether you're going to do that next, or...
You can do, yes. I've got you down along with John Paul.
Very quickly, then, it adds to what Councillor Gebby said, that we need to be clear what we're doing here, and I'm not happy the way it's put forward. Also, there's a big question about commission contracts. When they were introduced, and we've increased the number of commission contracts over the years, it was down to a financial saving because people weren't getting paid national living wage, they weren't getting paid anywhere near terms and conditions that the officers who were putting the contracts together. I'm sure they wouldn't work for some of the terms and conditions within the contracts. And it's 429,000 this year, but then there's 987. So based on what Jill has said, is that in addition each year? And if so, we need to seriously review what we're doing with commission contracts and start looking maybe at cooperative models or insourcing, in-house, because this is not the only way. And it sounds like it's not actually saving money, which was the idea when it was introduced perhaps 10 years ago for an increase in commission contracts.
John. Yes, Claire?
Shall I respond to that? Yeah, one of our strategic priorities is to review the way that we commission domiciliary care, particularly. We, as you'll know, members, we have already got other priorities in terms of recommissioning of supported living, for example, which was subject to Cabinet approval a number of months ago. But in terms of domiciliary care, in common with many other authorities across indeed the UK, we're looking to move towards a far more outcome focused way of commissioning that will challenge, I think, some of the traditional ways of commissioning domiciliary care, which were based on task and time. Again, you know, some of the innovation and the creativity we've seen through the pandemic with groups of providers working together when there've been pressures around workforce in order to make sure that we're continuing to provide care and support for individuals, looking at how providers work together in localities, and that we build flexibility into care packages. So I talked in remarks earlier about outcome focused practice, strength based practice. That needs to be reflected in the way that we commission services, so that we move away from a care plan which states, you know, a care slot is based on 15 minutes, which may be needed or may not be needed on a particular day, and gives care workers who see things, you know, in the front line and need to be empowered to deal with things in the front line, the flexibility to be able to do that. I've got confidence that when we come through and we recommission domiciliary care, we'll be able to build that in to the way that we do so. As I say, it's quite in line with the principles that are set out in the white paper from Welsh Government, which is out to consultation. And I think those relationships that we have with providers here in Bridgend mean that when we come to that formal recommission of domiciliary care provision, we'll be in a good place to move to a different model.
Thank you, Claire. I think Nicole would like to come in now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, it's certainly my ambition, and I think the ambition of the rest of the cabinet, that our procurement looks at other outcomes other than financial, looks at community benefit, looks at social benefit, looks at this outcome, this focus on the individual, and the communities that we're serving. So, I mean, that's definitely something that we're considering, and that I'm questioning on at every point is our you know, the sectors that and the people that we're working with, our partners, that they comply with more than just efficiency savings. And I'm really committed towards making sure that our outsourced domiciliary care workers are paid a living wage, a good living wage, the best that they can get. They are really important members of our community, and I know many of them are working very long hours. It impacts on women particularly, and it's just something that this crisis has shown what many of us knew to be true all along, but it's really highlighted it nationally, and I'm hoping that we can use that to ensure that they are paid as they should be.
Thank you for that, Nicole. And I totally agree. These people are probably some of the most important workers, particularly during this pandemic, and they've been heroes. And certainly they should be being paid exactly what they're entitled to. John, would you like to come back?
Thanks, Chair. I fully accept and appreciate what Nicole's saying, but we need to be clear, and back to what Councillor Gabby said, about what the people are being paid to these contracts. Because it doesn't sound like it is in line with what the council's committed to, what Councillor Gabby said.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. I think basically Jane also referred to the fact you couldn't actually change a contract that's already in place. But one would hope from here on in that all contracts would ensure categorically that everyone gets paid what they are entitled to be paid and what they should be paid as an employer. Thank you. John Paul, you also had something on SSW3. Do you wish to come in on it, or has it been answered?
It has been answered. Thank you, Chair.
I thought it might have been. Thank you very much, John Paul. Only other person I've got on pressures was Pam Davis, and it was a general comment, I believe. Pam, do you still wish to make it, or has it been made?
No, I think it's been made, but the other thing I wanted to ask, which is entirely new and fresh, is obviously with staff being on the sick while this has all been going on, just wanted to know, have we used agency staff, which is obviously an increased pressure, although may be needed because our own staff are actually not able to work because of the COVID virus or for other problems. Just wanted to know how much agency staff we've been using, which is always a bigger expense. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pam.
Yes, we have used agency workforce during the pandemic for the reasons outlined. You know, this pandemic has impacted hugely on that frontline workforce, as members have been setting out this morning, and it's impacted on them in terms of the work that they've done. But also they've become exposed to the virus because they live and work in the same community. So we have seen levels of sickness, both because people have become unwell themselves and also because they've been required required to self-isolate, and that means that we've had to work to bring agency workforce in. We have benefited as a council this year, in common with other councils, from Social Care Hardship Fund. So we have been able to support the sector quite considerably this year in terms of additional, over and above what we would normally pay for services that we commission. There's been additional money to go into both domiciliary care and into residential care providers to enable them to offset the impact of those additional costs around their workforce and other additional costs that they've incurred.
Thank you, Claire. Okay, Pam?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would still like to have costings if possible. I'm sure the rest of us would. And how much, I know we've had extra money to combat certain things, but I would still like to have costings of how much those agency staff and what wage they're on. Are they in parity with our own people? Are they getting more? Are they getting less? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Pam. I'm sure that we'd all like to have that information. Thank you. Right, I've come to the end of the budget pressures, but I'm now going to move to the reductions on page 42. And my first question is from Councillor John Spanswick.
Thank you, Chair. SSW1, and it's not just this one, I suppose, but it's £90,000 saving. But we don't really know what the impact is. It says remodeling day services, full reverse service, which could mean alternative methods of service delivery. Presumably there's work behind the £90,000, exactly how that's been calculated, what it means. It is only 3% of the budget. But before we can agree things, I guess, we need to know what's the impact and what are the alternative methods of service delivery. How is that going to, that saving take place and what we're going to result in?
Thank you for that, John.
Chair, if I may, Jackie Davis will come in on this one as the head of service responsible for the day opportunities.
That's fine. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. So in answer to that question, members may recall that we've previously brought a report to Scrutiny about the reviews that we were doing in terms of daytime opportunities for people in our communities, alongside our prevention and wellbeing agenda in terms of that. So the pandemic, as our director has already spoken about, really has stopped some of those plans in terms of taking that forward in terms of our community resilience. We are still looking at our overall delivery of daytime opportunities, and we are constantly reviewing how we deliver that, and our experience of the last 10 months has made us rethink how we're doing that. In terms of the 90,000, what we've been able to do is look at our current budget levels in those areas and look at already where we have vacancies and are able to reduce our budgets in those areas without any direct impact on service delivery. So in terms of the 90,000, we would be able to achieve that in the next financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Jackie. Do you wish to come back, John?
Yes, please, Chair, if I can. So the 90,000 is staff saving. I just wonder what those staff were doing before. If they can be gone, is that work going to be added to other people?
Okay, I can come back to you with a full explanation of that. But these are vacancies that we have been holding within our service.
Okay, so that's,
yeah.
Yep, surplus in the budget that wasn't required then.
I'm not sure I said it in that way.
No, that's me saying that. Sorry, but that's where it can be accommodated.
Okay,
yes,
thank you, John. It
can be accommodated. Yeah.
The leader would like to come in. Hugh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in response to Councillor Spanswick's question, it's important for members to know that the demand for day services has changed, and part of this reflects the pressures that we talked about earlier in terms of direct payments. So we've seen some of the residents that would have used and were using day services in the past are now choosing to use direct payments and paying for activities that they manage themselves and choose to undertake that are personalised to themselves. So we have seen a change in demand for day services, and that has enabled us to change the structure of those day services. And what we can do is bring more information back to members on that, because the service has evolved over the years. Savings have been made. It has been made more efficient, but it's also responded to different demands from the service users, which is important. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Hugh. Do you wish to come back, John?
No, thanks, Chair. Happy.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've got a further 4 questions from members, and these are all on clarity. So I'm going to ask Councillor Rod Shaw and then Councillor Janice Lewis to put forward theirs, because I think they're going to be similar, and then we'll go for an answer, and then I have Jane Gebby and Martin Jones who also have similar.
Chair, can I just ask my question, because it was on the daycare?
Oh, I beg your pardon, Nora, you've just popped up online now. Yes, carry on.
Okay, thanks, Chair. The last number of speakers mentioned about the demand for day services has changed. I'm just wondering what savings or stroke impact that is having on the on the daycare centre. Surely, you know, things must have altered there if people are taking, if residents are taking on direct payments and looking elsewhere for day services, activities, whatever, then obviously that's taking the pressures off the day centre. I know obviously this last 10 months, possibly the day centre hasn't been used because of COVID, but I'm wondering what savings were going to be made there if, you know, if residents are looking for alternatives.
Thank you, Nora.
Sorry, go ahead, Leader.
Yeah, I'm just going to make the point that, first of all, during the pandemic, we've delivered and continue to deliver day services in a different way. So we've provided support directly to many of those residents at home. And of course, that has brought different pressures, because not all the users are together in the same place. So there's actually some additional pressures there. But in terms of the other changes in the service, the more long-term service changes, we've actually been able to deliver better outcomes for some of those residents, because they are more independent. Some of them indeed have taken up employment opportunities, and they've been happier with the outcomes there, and also. And this has been reported previously, and it's a fair question from Councillor Clark and indeed Councillor Spans about day services. We've already made efficiency savings in the day service. We certainly made them last, I believe, the year before, because the service has continued to evolve. I remember when we had far more centres, and those centres were not fit for purpose. And we've now rationalised the number of sites that we've had in recent years, and continue to reconfigure the staffing structure to reflect the changes in the way that we deliver the services and the number of people that we're supporting directly through day services. But it's crucial to stress that we're still supporting people, but we're supporting them in a different way that is about how they want to be supported. And lots of those people didn't want to go to one place and do the same activities as lots of other people. They want to have a more individualized. Some people want to do that, they really like it, and we'll continue to provide for them. Other people, they wanted a more personalized and individual activities, and that is what has been delivered and provided to them. Thanks, Chair.
Could I just come back on that, Chair?
Yes, certainly, Nora.
When you mentioned about supporting people in the community, are we talking about residents that are having direct payments and are actually paying for that support, or are they having its support through social services? Just for me to understand.
So it's through social services in terms of day services. And people, oh yes, Jackie wants to come in.
Yeah, I just want to say, Leader, Jackie has indicated
far better qualified to answer than me. Apologies.
Yeah, over to you, Jackie.
Okay, thank you, Leader and Chair. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just thought I could add something to the conversation, really. So as the Leader said rightly, that we've been on a significant change journey in our daytime opportunities within Bridgend Adult Social Care. And I can say that over the last probably about 6 years, I haven't got the figures to hand, but we've probably saved in excess of £1 million in this area of the social services budget. In terms of that change journey, we've been doing a significant amount of work in enhancing our community developments, and some of this is through active support through social services, but some of this is about promoting independence and supporting people for a period of time where they no longer need our support because they're able to access what they need within the communities. And I suppose what we haven't got is one model that fits everything, because everyone has different needs. Where we're at in terms of the service at the moment, we've been on this journey. We had a sense of direction and a vision for what we were trying to achieve for our population here in Bridgend. But what we have got now is 10 months experience of delivering something very different in our communities and supporting people in a much, in lots of different ways. And there's been so much creativity and innovation by our staff. It's been, it's been great to be part of some of that. So where the service is at the moment is that we're actually just reflecting on what's happened. We're talking to the people that we're supporting, and we're going to relook at our whole model really in terms of that. So some of it could be significant changes, but some of it could just be very small things about how we do that and how we work within our communities with what we've got there at the moment. So in terms of Councillor Clark's question, so some of it could be through direct payments, but that would just be one option out of quite a number that we're looking at in terms of going forward. So I suppose I just wanted to add that to the conversation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Could I still come back? I'm so sorry to be labouring this point. Sorry. Thank you, Jackie, so much for that explanation. Can I just ask then, after that explanation, can I, what is the future of the daycare centre that we've got then near Waterton? Can I ask that, please?
I'm not sure at this stage. Do you mean the Bridgend Resource Centre?
Yeah, the one by Lidl.
Yeah. So as you know, that's one of our flagship buildings in terms of what we deliver out of there. We are, like I say, we are reviewing our whole model. At the moment, that delivers very specialist care. And what I would like to see in the future is that we continue to do that in terms of enhancing our specialist care and potentially have a hub with other partners as well using that. So there's the future for that. At this moment, we're still working our way through. But we always know that we're going to need some specialist places in order to support some of our people with most complex needs, including individuals with learning disability and our dementia services going forward. So that would be some of the modelling that we'll be doing over the next sort of couple of months, really. So I think our director would like to speak as well.
Thank you, Jackie.
Is that okay? I'll just
be over to you, Claire.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. I think, you know, there's been massive innovation and creativity over the years, and then, as Jackie said, just lastly as well, in building on that, it's really important that we work with people with learning disabilities and other disabilities, families and carers in designing those services of the future. Most people with learning disabilities tell us that they would like to work, they want to contribute. We've got some fantastic schemes, would be Leaf. We can build on those as well, but we always know that there's going to be need for specialist provision as well for those people with the most complex needs. But it's so important as we design that future that we don't give you a blueprint today, that we do that with and alongside the people who actually use these services.
Thank you, Claire. All right, Nora.
Yes, thank you very much for that explanation. You know, I don't sit on this overview and scrutiny committee, so it was just sort of understanding how things are working. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Nora. Right, before I move on to the next two questions, Councillor David White has keyed in a question regarding direct payments and how are they monitored and reviewed. Could we possibly just have a very brief answer to that so we can move on? Thank you.
Yeah, they're audited from a financial point of view, and then in the same way that everybody who's got a care and support need has at least an annual review from their social worker, they're reviewed that way in terms of the review of the care plan as well.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Right, the next, I'm going to ask Councillor Rod Shaw and then Councillor Janice Lewis, because they've got a question on clarity on the budget proposals.
Indeed. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it may be scrutiny fatigue or the compressed time frame, but particularly on SSW2, but it relates to others as well. When I read the narrative, I could see nothing there that directs me to the cuts that you're asking us to scrutinise. So we've got £150,000 and then in red for the following years 225 and 200. How do those figures relate to the narrative for that particular item?
Thank you, Rod. Yes, Claire, carry on.
Yes, yeah. These are difficult ones because it doesn't relate to a specific service or a building or members of staff. These savings are built up cumulatively from working in a strength-based way, supporting people with care and support needs in different ways. And what all of that means cumulatively is that we spend less money because we commission or provide ourselves less care. So to give you some really concrete examples, in the past, somebody may have received 4 calls a day from a domiciliary care provider. By doing some work with that individual, understanding what matters to them, it could be that rather than having 4 calls a day, they would rather access a community centre, one of the community hubs, you know, be connected into something which really interests them during the day. And as a consequence of that, the number of domiciliary care calls they have a day reduces. They're happier and have better outcomes, and it also costs us less money, and we're able to see some reduction in our budget. So there could be 100 people who have similar adjustments to their care plans. It's very much building on strengths. It's building on people living better lives that they themselves are taking forward. It's quite difficult then to list all those individual changes rather than talk, I suppose, in general terms about a transformation in the way that we provide care and support and connection for people. So this morning I was looking at some outcomes from the work that the local community connectors have been doing even just during the COVID period, and it's just fantastic. And what they're doing is keeping people safe and connected and away from statutory commissioned services for longer, or even those who do access statutory services, they're accessing less of those services. So really in line with our priorities about promoting independence and people to remain as independent as possible as long as possible.
Thank you for that, Claire. Rod, you wish to come back?
Very briefly, if I may, I can see, Claire, thank you very much for your explanation there. I can see what you're saying, but why are they in red for the subsequent 2 years?
I think they're in red, Councillor Shaw, because of the uncertainty that we've talked about in terms of coming through the COVID period. So this year is a year like no other, as I said at the start. And what we're seeing is quite unusual in terms of the way that we're providing care and support. So we're seeing quite a significant reduction in terms of the number of placements in care homes. There's lots and lots of reasons for that, including, you know, the nervousness of families to be making placements for reasons I think are well understood. We're seeing an increasing complexity of care and support within the community that we're providing, and some of the reason for that is that those opportunities which I just talked about there aren't available because people are having to remain within their own homes, not access the community in the way that we would normally promote. And I think whilst all of us are hoping and working so hard to get the vaccine rolled out and for society to be in a position where safely Welsh Government can reduce those restrictions, none of us really know how long that's going to go on for. So the impact of that on people with care and support needs is not able to be planned as well as we normally would. Also, I think, as Councillor Burnett referred to in one of her earlier answers, we're seeing people with long COVID and the impact on younger people of what they've been through in terms of that health trauma. And we still need to be doing some planning around what that means for social care budgets going forward. So it means that we're not in quite the level of detail around our financial and service planning in terms of the quantum and complexity of needs that we're meeting that we would normally wish to be.
Thank you for that, Claire. I think Nicole wishes to add something in there as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think this is reflective. We were set up before the COVID crisis set to really start pushing the prevention agenda and co-production, working with our communities. We had transformation funding in order to sort of really focus the positives that would come out of a person-centred approach, social prescribing, really sort of concentrating on resilience of communities and working with the third sector in order. I mean, the ambition of this is that through sort of effective social prescribing and resilient communities, that the cost saving potential for ourselves as a social care service and a knock-on in health could be enormous, while at the same time we're making the lives of individuals much better, happier. They can reduce the amount, you know, we can help tackle depression, we can help to tackle mobility issues. There are so many positives to this, but COVID has just come in and absolutely put everything on hold, and we're not going to be able to get back to that way of working now effectively until people can start getting together again. So and the sort of unknowns that have come out of COVID, we can't underestimate. So they have to be a red, and it has to be a considerable amount of money in that red, so that we're not caught short and we don't have to turn anybody down. So it's if COVID hadn't have happened, this would be an enormous positive. We'd be saving money and making efficiencies without making any cuts, and only seeing positive outcomes for our communities. So the timing is difficult.
Thank you for that, Nicole. Rod, do you wish to come back?
I won't labour it, Chair, because I know other people want to speak on this very subject, so
okay.
I'll pass. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Right, I've got another 3 people on a similar subject. The next one I have down is Janice Lewis, and then it's Jane Gebby.
Thank you, Chair. As I would like to state that I am not clear at all on SSW2. It doesn't come out clear to me. I've read it several times. Obviously, listening to you now, it's clear to yourselves, but you haven't put it clear for everyone else. So I think that we want more clarity. We want it put out because you know what you're saying, but you haven't given it to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. I'll let Jane Gebby come in as well now, because it's pointless you responding to everybody if they're going to say similar things. Jane, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for your comments. However, we are asked as Scrutiny to make proposals to this document today, and we can't actually make any proposals to any of the social services documentation because it's all under your reduction proposals, and we haven't got anything to make any recommendations about. I fully understand about social prescribing. You're asking about returning to a model that was in existence 30 years ago, and we had lots of community groups that in order to do it. The pandemic has shown us that we've had volunteers that have gone above and beyond, all of whom aren't paid, but actually those community groups are now disappearing. So you will be unable to rely on social prescribing because those groups won't be there. I'm fully understanding and well versed in the Preston model, and we won't get it that way either. But I would like to see what your proposals are for reduction, because at the minute we haven't got any, and I can't make any recommendations because there is nothing to make any recommendations on.
Thank you, Jane. Claire, do you wish to respond to the last two speakers?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And you know, I certainly take on board the comments about needing to perhaps be far clearer in the explanatory notes about exactly what we're meaning here. Hopefully my explanation a little bit earlier supported what we are proposing, which I think builds on a journey that you've been on in Bridgend for many years. I talked a little while ago about the models of practice that we've been working to, going back to the Social Services and Wellbeing Act coming into existence, and what we've managed to work through by moving from what was under the Community Care Act a very deficit model and way of doing things, particularly in adult services, where we put a lot of care and support into individuals who, when we really got beneath what they were saying to us, wanted to live their own lives, wanted to have control and choice over their own lives. And like all of us, that means occupation. It means being able to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Direct payments is part of that solution, but so is connecting people into what's happening within communities. And we've got fantastic social capital in communities in Bridgend. There's a lot going on to connect people into, but there's always more that we need to do and we need to develop, and that community development part of the models that we're talking about is as important as the connection into what's already there. I just want to mention something that Councillor Burnett mentioned about transformation, because it is important that I draw Scrutiny's attention to this, in that there was a very ambitious set of proposals from Bridgend partners, so that's the third sector, the local authority and the health board, to really build on all the good work that had already been done, and to take us to that next level in terms of transformation. And Welsh Government have got a policy, Healthier Wales, and they invested money via a transformation fund into delivery of that on the ground. We have heard that money that we're going to be getting next year is going to be less than we had anticipated, and that will create partners across Bridgend real challenges in terms of delivering on this agenda for all the reasons we know around COVID. The way that we took forward those transformation ambitions this year was different to what had originally been anticipated. It's not that excellent work hasn't been done, it has, but not in quite the way set out. So we are behind where we would have wanted to be in terms of delivering the original business cases, and Welsh Government have now indicated that we will have less time to deliver against those original ambitions. So we're really having to look at revised business cases which we can bring forward for scrutiny to deliver on these objectives, which I think adds to the red rag rating which we'd already sort of indicated due to COVID was put in place.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to call Martin Jones now and then Lynn Walters. They're the final two questions. Over to you, Martin. If you're having difficulty, Martin, I'll move to Lynn and then come back to you.
Can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, I am having some problems with this this laptop. My question has been answered and has been well made by fellow councillors.
Yeah.
But if I may, what I'm picking up here is obviously this directorate provides a diverse amount of services to very vulnerable groups, which are costly. And I just wonder, is there scope for communication to the public who actually pay their precept, pay their rates, to improve communication to the public, to tell them what sort of services the directorate provides without betraying any form of confidentiality? This directorate has a specific responsibility for vulnerability. So could we not improve our communication with the public so they're aware that their money is being well spent on looking after the most vulnerable? At the moment, there is a perception with the public that their council precept is being paid to collect their waste, to look after the roads, when in fact a large chunk of their money is being spent looking after vulnerable people. And I do believe there is scope to improve communication there. That is, of course, as I've said previously, not betraying any form of confidentiality.
Thank you, Martin. I'll move now to Lynn, and then I will go to Nicole and the Chief Executive for a response. Okay, Lynn?
Thank you very much, Chair. My question may actually help us with a budget. I don't know how many of you know, but my stepson is severely disabled and is funded by Essex Council. Now, they hadn't reviewed his fees for a considerable period of time, and we have just managed to get the NHS to pay 40% of his fees for the care home in Yorkshire. So it's really a case of, are we up to date with all of our reviews for really complex cases? Because that is one way of saving a huge amount of money. It does take a lot of time, and it's a lot of angst for the families and the receivers of the care, and then the care funding. But it's definitely helped us, and it could help a lot of our residents. And I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to go in 2 minutes for another appointment. So apologies, but I just wanted to add that to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Right, well, I'll move now to Nicole, who has indicated she wishes to come in to respond to both Martin and Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, in response to Martin, I absolutely, totally agree with you, Martin. And I think the Directorate really has stepped up its comms and its positive comms, particularly over the last year. But there's always room for positive stories showing exactly what they do. So I'm particularly keen. I know that the leader and Mark are keen to make sure that happens and that we step that up.
Thank you. Chief Exec?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to come in on particularly Councillor Jones's points. Again, I fully agree about the comms challenge, really, and I think a couple of things I'd like to say. First of all, I hope it hasn't gone unnoticed, but we have significantly stepped up our comms over the last year and made a very clear attempt on a daily basis to ensure that both members and members of the public have a stream of comms and press releases, and included within that, though perhaps not sufficiently from what you're saying, have been lots of stories about successes and indeed challenges within social care. Maybe some of the challenges are particularly acute in social care, because I think we work with it, we understand it. Perhaps maybe it's more acute because perhaps it's more difficult for some of the public unless they have a direct link to understand where that money goes. But I suppose what I was going to say is that the challenge is broader than that, and I think it's a challenge for us all. I don't think it just falls to the comms department. It's probably a challenge for all of the directors, but also for all of the elected members, because I am constantly surprised, despite having spent 30 years in local government, that the level of understanding that people still have more generally about where we spend our money and what we do. And try not to follow social media too closely, but if you look at recent comments within social media about, for example, council tax rise, amongst various comments, people think that we fund the PCC. They still think, of course, that we gift money to Cardiff, and all various other things, and they have very little idea about where their money goes. So there's clearly a deficit, isn't there, in terms of people's understanding, and rather than blaming the public, I think I'm saying we need to step up to the mark. So people simply don't understand how much a care package costs, in the same way as they don't understand that it costs £5,000 a year to send a child to school per year. And I think, for me, we probably have to be more straightforward, more honest, and get a lot of those messages out. Because I think if people begin to understand where some of that money goes, then at least you have a greater understanding. You may not always agree, but you have a greater understanding about the pressures on us and some of our statutory requirements of where we have to spend money. So broadly, Councillor Jones, I think you make a really valid point, one that's close to my heart, one that we're trying to address, but I recognise we still have a long way to go.
Thank you, Chief. Claire would like to respond to the two questions.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, just really briefly on the communications piece. There's such an opportunity now post-COVID, because I think probably for the first time in my career in social care, people are valuing and recognising the contribution of social care workforce alongside the health workforce. So we will redouble our efforts with comms colleagues to make sure that what actually happens on the ground is understood, and we communicate that. I think there's some grounds for hope, because in the consultation around the budget, support for the vulnerable and the elderly, I think came through as the top priority from the population of Bridgend. Just then briefly to respond to the questions from the two councillors about the reviews. Yes, we are always doing work in this area, always working in as integrated way as we can with our health colleagues around those relatively small number of very complex situations which require health and social care support, to make sure that the balance between health services and social care services is right, to make sure again that we're commissioning in a strength-based way and we're identifying outcomes within the care and support and accommodation that we commission. So some placements can be very, very expensive, and we see that in both adults and children's services. We operate from quite an efficient base here in Bridgend. So just to highlight, we've talked quite a lot about adults today, but in children's services, our number of children and young people in out-of-area residential placements is really low compared to the rest of Wales. And that means in terms of the budget, some of where we've got to go to make further efficiencies that I might have been looking at in other councils aren't available. But I equally know that there's some very high cost situations, very complex situations that we're reviewing constantly, and are always in my discussions with Jackie and with Laura to make sure that we're taking those forward and reviewing them in the right person-centred way with our partners.
Thank you, Claire. Jill would like to add in here as well. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you. Just to endorse everything that's been said, really, Chair, but also to pick up the point about communication and how we get to the general public and our stakeholders. And I think Claire said there's never been a better time. The focus on social care is absolutely huge. I've never seen it quite so much in my career either. Now we obviously send out in the traditional way, we send out leaflets, we send out budget books, and we've tried really hard, I think, to be very innovative at how we get to people who perhaps, I have to say, in some cases aren't really that interested in what the council does, only when it goes wrong or only when it affects them. So it is a really difficult conundrum. But I think what I'll take away from this meeting really is to look at perhaps how we capture the opportunity of digital and see how we can perhaps give better information on some of our statutory services. As Claire says, it was one of the top 3 that came back from the budget consultation. So perhaps a little bit more explanation would be helpful. So I'll take that away from the meeting, Chair.
Thank you for that, Jill. Cabinet Member Howell Williams would like to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And obviously, greater awareness of the budget has been a real central sort of theme to what I've tried to achieve. At the beginning of this, the report that we're going through now, I know we've gone straight to the pressures, straight to the reductions, because that's where the interesting bits are. But at the very beginning of the report, we do start with a budget narrative. And it's very difficult, I suppose, to explain clearly, how we operate as a council, but there are some interesting information, I suppose, there at the very beginning of the report, trying to get across to the public that we deliver somewhere like 800 services is a challenge. It is very difficult, but it's almost, I would welcome, I suppose, some feedback on how we can achieve that. How we can achieve that sort of greater clarity of what we provide to the public. So it's something that I'm very keen to try and do. And if we could have some sort of constructive sort of dialogue then, and how we can get that message across, that would be very useful for me. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Howell. I see Councillor Pam Davies has referred to needing an answer to the assessments question. Do you want to come back in, Pam?
Yes, I'm just wondering, I mean, it was bad enough before. We did have a very big suicide rate in Bridgend at one time, if you remember, but there was 3 and 4 months of waiting to get assessed. So I'm not surprised at that, because where do people go when they're desperate and they're not being seen? So I'm just wondering where we are with the assessments, with all the added problems surrounding COVID, etc. at this moment in time. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that. Claire, do you wish to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Jackie if she could pick that up. It might be that we need to come back with the exact figures.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Claire.
Yeah, if it's okay, Chair, we'll come back with the details for that.
Right, thank you very much for that, Jackie. Right, members, I think what we have seen pretty much unanimous to this is that they don't think there has been sufficient clarity for them to actually make any recommendations because they're not sure of the substance, only about the proposals. So is it your wish, members, to try and revisit this again before we make recommendations?
Yes, please, Chair.
If anybody doesn't wish to try and do this, can you indicate, please? I will need to see it or hear it verbally. I've got no way, we're not in the chamber, I've got no way of knowing how the committee feels. And it is your decision ultimately, not mine.
Yes, please, Chair. And if we could have those numbers for assessments, because there could be people that are really desperate in our area to get some sort of help, and they may be put back in the list.
Okay.
I agree, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Well, what I don't have is anybody that says no. So I'm going to ask. Yes.
Sorry, I think Jill Lewis has indicated she'd like to speak on this. So.
Yeah, okay.
Chair, could I just remind Scrutiny, the purpose of today is to make recommendations. I understand the points that are being made, but the timescale is not conducive to not making recommendations. Scrutiny, as you know, produced an overview report for Cabinet to take into account, and the timescales are such that following this meeting, there's only a limited number of days to turn that report around. So you will have to have a plan B if it's not going to be possible to make recommendations from today, because that has to happen in terms of the timetable.
Yes, I understand where you're coming from, Jill. Also, I'm saying that virtually every member of the Scrutiny feels they are unable to make recommendations. I do appreciate the timescale is tight. I'm merely exploring the possibility because in the main, Scrutiny has always sought to be positive, not negative. and where members cannot to actually make recommendations, I'm simply looking, do we have a plan B? Is it possible for us to have another meeting in order to make recommendations across the board with confidence? I've got Alex Williams. You wish to say something, Alex? And then I'll go to the leader.
Yes, please. Just to build upon what you were saying, really, Chair. And I agree with Jill in what she said previously about these being political decisions. And I think we all here, as members of Scrutiny, want to be constructive in this process. And actually, if we want to preserve a budget in one area, we need to come up with a solution on where we need to cut in other areas. So I appreciate that point. However, I don't feel in this particular report on the MTFS and the budget that we have sufficient granularity of data to be able to make those political decisions or those recommendations to those people who do make those decisions in Cabinet. So, in our pre-meeting, I think we were all in agreement that we would like to see that granularity of data and return and reconvene at the earliest possible opportunity to be able to consider that and make constructive recommendations to Cabinet.
Thank you for that, Alex. And Hugh, you would like to come in?
Yeah, thanks very much for bringing me back in, Chair. I was just going to suggest that a briefing note be drafted as soon as possible that provides as much detail as we can for members, and that may negate the need for you to meet. I'm sure members will want reassurance that there will be, and I hope you've heard some of that today, that there's no proposals in there to cut any frontline services, and the impact on the community. It will not be there as a result of these proposals, and if that could be articulated, and perhaps if you do feel the need to meet, then I'm sure an urgent meeting could be held. But we try to get those details to you in black and white as soon as possible, and I'm sure that's something that we could do. But for example, on the day services, just to be clear, we're not proposing any major changes to the day services. We're not proposing to close any day services, and likewise with the other saving, the other budget reduction, there are no proposals in there to reduce services to individuals, for example, or carry out any major service reconfiguration. That is about continuing that transformation of services and prevention and early intervention. But I understand that needs to be in black and white and much clearer, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for that, Hugh. Mark, do you wish to come in?
If I may, Chair, to make a few points, really. I mean, we clearly have a problem now, because I suppose what Jill was trying to articulate is that timescales are very tight, but clearly I understand the members' wish to have more detail. A couple of things for me. First of all, I think therefore we need to be absolutely clear what more detail you're looking for, because I think the director's struggling a little bit to understand what more she could provide. So I think we need to nail that if we can. The second thing, and this is more for my benefit really, is that I was under the understanding that the granularity that was described should have been part of the breadth process as well. And so we've arrived here at a position where, from my point of view, rather unexpectedly, we've got to a point where we're being told there's not enough detail, and of course this is something that's been, the report went out a week ago, was agreed by Cabinet, etc. So I think the other thing is it would have been useful to have known that prior, because there's certainly no desire to not provide you with as much information as you like, really. So my concern now is I'm not sure realistically whether we're going to be able to arrange another meeting, hence I think the leader's suggestion about a briefing note. I mean, obviously if we can, we will, but it is going to be tricky, I think, in that sense.
Thank you for that, Mark. Kelly wishes to speak, and as the monitoring officer, I think we should hear what she's got to say on this.
Thank you, Chair. It was just really to input what Mark has just said, that there has been a process up until this point, including BREP, and the papers have been out. You know, there was the Cabinet report, which was probably circulated at least a fortnight ago, and then this report. But equally, and more concerning from my point, is the fact of trying to fit in another meeting. So if you don't, you know, make recommendations at this point, things are looking very tight, to be honest, because the Cabinet meeting, I think, is coming up early February. Reports have to be drafted and sent out. So I'm just putting it out there that there may not be time to go through the whole process you were requesting here. We may have to look at an alternative way to do this.
Chair, if I may just explain, yes. The recommendations that were to be drafted from today and yesterday need to be completed by next Tuesday, to be sent out to the meeting of costs on the 1st of February, and then the recommendations from the 1st of February need to be sent out on the 3rd of February to Cabinet report. So we haven't actually got the 4 clear days to call a meeting under the normal rules before the recommendations need to be published at the moment.
Mm. Thank you for that, Meryl. Has everybody spoken that wanted to speak? Jill, you wanted to come back in?
Just really to say what Meryl said was that the timescales don't allow for calling a further meeting. So I think perhaps the clarity over what is required in order to make recommendations would be quite useful. So is it simply clarity on SWB2 on that particular item? What is it that members haven't had? Because we've discussed all these at BREP all the way through the year, and obviously BREP will be able to feed in, perhaps to give the committee some assurance.
I don't think it is purely this directorate, Jill, that is being referred to, because no recommendations have been visited at all from yesterday yet, because it was cut short. So I can't speak for the other 2 chairs at all, but I think there are issues on that. I'm just, you know, most members are feeling exactly the same way. So they clearly they are not happy at the moment. Is there any way that we can circumvent to try and get a meeting where the chairs can clearly indicate which areas they would like clarification on? You know, we're not asking for a long meeting, just a simple clarification so that members can be told exactly what it is they're making recommendations on, where they're unsure. And it would be down to the chairs and scrutiny to get that information to you as soon as possibly can be.
Chair, as it's been pointed out, that there isn't going to be time to have another meeting. Right. So even if scrutiny could get that information tomorrow to be circulated to directors today or tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow, yes.
And then if that was, you know, if the directors had until early next week to pull it together, there isn't going to be enough time then to have another meeting and fit in with the timescales that we got, which, as Jill can confirm, we need to comply with the timescales. So
that is the legal point that we're at then, Kelly?
Yes, there isn't time for another meeting.
Right, okay, well that's very clear. Does anybody wish to come in? I've had some
yes, please, Chair.
Yes, Alex, is it?
Yes, please, Chair. Thanks very much. I got to say, I think this is why people are so disengaged. You know, we just had a discussion about why people are so disengaged with the process of council. And, you know, we discussed yesterday a very important matter relating to the vaccination programme, which affects everyone's lives. But now we're not prepared to meet at short notice to discuss something which is also very important, and that is the budget process and the MTFS. So, you know, I think we should meet again to discuss these recommendations. All corporate directors must have the granularity of data. my colleague, Councillor Martin Jones, said earlier on that you work to the budget in the MTFS 365 days a year, so you should be able to provide this information at very short notice. Furthermore, BREP meets in private. You know, we do not see the papers. Fair enough, members can feed back into us and feedback into the officers, but we do not see those papers and we do not attend those meetings, apart from those people who sit on BREP. So I think we should be a bit more flexible in meeting at very short notice. I don't think, you know, it's beyond the realms of possibility that we could meet on Monday. And, you know, I would suggest that presenting recommendations which are robust for Cabinet to consider should be a priority at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alex. Does anybody wish to? Phil White, please. You put something down. Could you please elaborate on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Here we are again about timescales. I'm just wondering, those questions that members have been uncertain about today, could they be circulated with the answers or responses, and then for us to get a consensus from members whether they approve then or not? But again, if we can't call meetings, I do ask previously as well. Meryl did quote that the rules are quoted normal rules, but unfortunately we're not in the normal at this moment in time. So we will have to review the scenarios for situations like this. But if speed is of the essence to get it back in for the report timings, then we've got to have one way of agreeing. And if that's going to be meaning emailing all members up with the answers today or tomorrow morning, then so be it for us to arrive at that answer, Chair.
Right, thank you for that, Bill. I think basically what we're asking, and Meryl touched on this, the timeline, is it absolutely rigid for TOSC to meet a week Monday and for Cabinet to meet the following week? Is there any opportunity for flexibility so that Scrutiny will feel that it is fulfilling its role? If anybody wants to answer.
Chair, sorry, Jill. From my perspective, to meet the timelines we have to for Jill to get the budget approved, then no, we can't fit in those extra meetings you were looking for, and that's not a Bridgend Council requirement. You know, that is in legislation that we have to set meetings in accordance with the Local Government Act.
Okay. Thank you for that, Kelly. Right, I've got Jane wishing to speak. Briefly, Jane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Page 12 of the report. In order to be sustainable going forward, the Council is ensuring that any changes are introduced in a planned and timely way. Our paperwork does not give us the changes that you want us to make recommendations on. It's that simple.
Right, thank you, Jane. Howell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think, you know, it's what is the question that needs to be answered? I mean, that's what I'm struggling with here. I'm sorry. I mean, I've listened to a lot of questions. I've heard the answers. I mean, yes, okay, that might not be the answer you want to hear, but you know, is a different answer going to make any difference? That's what so it's very important that we understand what the question is, and maybe if we can have that discussion now. What is the question? And then give directors an opportunity to answer that.
I think the question is, Howell, that, and I'm not going to speak for the other two chairs, but there were things yesterday we didn't get to the recommendations that they were unhappy with. I'm going to move to Mike Clark now and ask him to speak.
Where's the...
Thank you, Chair. I wonder whether we're all talking about another meeting. Yesterday we held the scrutiny for communities, and that was adjourned yesterday because we ran out of time, and we are going to follow up on that. I wonder whether there is scope for this meeting to be adjourned and for the answers to be obtained and then reconvened as the existing meeting. I don't want to hold anything up any more than anybody else, but that seems to me that might be something that the monitoring officer might be able to accommodate.
Thank you, Mike. Kelly, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. There is scope to adjourn a meeting, but again, the difficulty we have is the tight turnaround for the recommendations to then be put forward to COSC and then Cabinet. So even if you adjourned until early next week, you're not allowing sufficient time for preparation for those 2 future meetings.
If I could come back, Chair, if I may. I think we're assuming that as a scrutiny committee, we will want to suggest a whole range of changes. I don't think that's what the issue is. The issue is that we just want more information around the changes that are proposed. That does not necessarily mean they won't get supported.
No, that's absolutely right, Mike, because we've never sought to be negative in scrutiny. Nicole.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I have, as you know, been part of the BREP process, and I'm now a cabinet member, so can see things from both sides. And I know, Cheryl, you are able to see things from both sides as well. And I am concerned, actually, and I see this as a failing of the BREP panel, in all honesty, because it's their job to all turn up and all to scrutinise this MTFS before it comes to wider scrutiny by council. And if there are any points that need clarifying, then it's up for BREP to ensure that the information is provided before it comes to scrutiny. And at this point, I am dealing with directors who are under an enormous amount of operational pressures, and we're relying on that process and doing their best to make sure that while they're dealing with unknowns of enormous proportions, to ensure that they are providing the information that was requested by BREP ready for council. So I have to defend our staff. They have done what they have been told all the way along, and at this point it's very difficult to resolve. We have answered verbally any questions that have been asked. If anything needs to be put in writing, if the verbal answers need to be put in writing, then that is fine, in order for all councillors to be able to consider. But I'm at odds to know what else is supposed to be done, to be honest.
Thank you for that, Nicole, and I do totally understand the pressure that everybody is under. And I think basically what we have, we're talking about 12 people in BREP who don't sit right across the full spectrum of scrutiny and may not necessarily be able to pick up what people are picking up on today, because it's only now we've had the settlement. Everything else was just, maybe. But I do take your point, and believe you me, the last thing in the world I want to do is to create any problems. What I'm going to suggest here now is that we ask our scrutiny officer what is the feasibility of possibly doing something, because they would have to do the work, and if it's not possible for them, then there's not a lot further to be said. Before that, I'm going to ask Councillor Julia Williams to speak. She has not spoken yet today.
Hello, hi everyone. I'm just wondering, what was the point of this meeting at all if we're just expected to agree to everything without asking questions? We're completely irrelevant as councillors. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think I'll bother turning up next time.
Thank you for that, Julia. Martin, you wanted to say something at this point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Look, I'm a little disappointed that BREP is being used in the way in which it's been presented. You've made a good point, Chair. There are only 12 people who are members of BREP. Yeah. There are members today who have made representations regarding the budget who are not part of BREP. So let's not use the BREP process as an excuse. And please, let's stop finger pointing. Look, there is a disagreement here. There's a disagreement in relation to members feeling they don't have the relevant information. It is a criticism, of course it is, but officers have to understand that. Now, if we are to move forward, the best way to move forward is that we finish the scrutiny meeting. The scrutiny committee then decides what its recommendations are, and we provide those recommendations to officers. and then they can decide what is the best way forward. I'm a little bit confused about the legislative requirements and all that. I am confused with that. The reality is we need to move forward, but let's stop, please, this finger pointing. It's not getting us anywhere. Let's move on with the meeting. Let's get our recommendations there, present our recommendations to Cabinet and the Corporate Management Board, and let's move forward.
Yes, I think perhaps, Martin, we are in a situation where our legal advice is that we cannot either defer the meeting, postpone it, delay it until early next week, because that still will not meet the legal requirements. I certainly would not be a party to suggesting that we do anything that does not comply with our constitution. It would be very remiss of me, but I do feel that perhaps members, there are so many members, and you can see quite clearly it is not a political thing, because it's right across the political spectrum, that we do need to address this situation for future meetings.
Chair, if I could just come in, you asked me to.
Yes,
just to make a couple of points. To the invitees who are asking what are the members asking for from scrutiny, it was generally that there wasn't enough detail provided in the paperwork when we had the pre-meeting this morning and went through it. Some of the detail, I think, people would agree has been provided today. We've got questions remaining for the Chief Executive's Directorate and the wider Council pressures and savings, and we've also asked our colleagues from communities to come back when we email them to answer questions on communities. And I'm conscious that development control will be starting at 2 o'clock, so I was going to suggest if we could get on with those in the meantime. And get the questions done.
Okay, that's fine, Meryl. I think we do have to move on at this point, and then we'll return to the recommendations following the Chief Executive's Directorate. I think I've looked at all the comments, and I think perhaps we need to revisit the role of BREP in order for it to be more open to all members.
The Chief has asked to speak, Chair.
Sorry?
The Chief has asked to speak.
Oh, certainly. Come in, Mark.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, because I've been listening carefully, and I think a couple of members have made the point about needing to be pragmatic, trying to find a response. So just to be clear, from certainly an officer point of view, we're obviously happy to try and provide any information you require. I think the issue for us is that we're being asked right at the last second, as opposed to if this was an issue being asked previously and we could have presented anything. I'm also not aware that the process is any different this year to any other year. Unfortunately, in order to make it manageable, what you always receive is a summary of the budget savings, and I've been here long enough to know that we've always had a process where for certain savings you've asked for further detail. So I come back to the point that it can't be every saving that you're concerned about. So if you can list those that you particularly want additional information on, because it absolutely isn't a fait accompli, it's something that we want your input on. If you can list that to us, despite the huge pressures on managers, and we are in a global pandemic, I will ensure that the directors try and provide that response and that additional information as soon as possible to give you the comfort. But I would ask that that's selective, because what we can't do is go through a whole series of 30 or 40 savings and provide granular detail on every one. There must be some that you're particularly concerned about, and if you can identify them, I will ensure that the directors and I give you that information if you feel there's additional information in order for you to either agree or disagree with the proposal. But I think we do also need to learn some lessons here collectively, and I'm not pointing fingers, because what I will say is that the process, if we get to this point and only now is this raised, then clearly it's not working.
Yes, thank you for that, Mark. I think that would probably be down to the scrutiny chairs, making sure that we advise Meryl of where members have indicated to us when we've chaired the meetings, where they would like a bit more clarity and a bit more sort of understanding of what was the. I think really.
Can I just make a suggestion? Is that okay?
Yeah, you can do. Briefly.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, yeah, I did put in after Martin that I'd like to just mention that we seem to be going down a rabbit hole here. We haven't concluded yesterday's meeting yet,
No.
so would it be more pragmatic, more useful for us to continue and conclude this session so we can get to the point where we're making recommendations? At that point, there is an opportunity to say this is the area we need granularity on, but we haven't concluded the process yet.
I think from this meeting, the budget pressures were very much dealt with. It was only the SSW2 that was really most members seem to have difficulty with. So from this meeting, I think it's perfectly clear. From the other meetings, then obviously we haven't had the chiefs yet, which will be me. I will hand over to John Paul and Tom Gifford to identify. Okay. Right then, well, we've come to an impasse here. We certainly cannot arrange other meetings. We've been advised by the monitoring officer that will not be legally possible. So we need to move on to the Chief Executive's Directorate. I'm going to say everybody have a 5-minute comfort break because there were a lot of complaints about lack of comfort breaks. 5 minutes. It is now 11:52. Back at 11:50. Well, give me 5 minutes. 11:58. All agreed?
Right.
Okay, 5 minutes. Meryl, would you want us to move straight into the Chief Executives now?
Yes, Chair. I think questions to the Chief Executive and then the wider council, and then we'll email communities to join us for the revisiting the community's questions.
Right, I will hand over to John Paul for that one. Okay then. Right. I've had the first indication from the pre-meeting was Councillor Alex Williams, who has a question on the budget pressures we're talking now, CEX2. Alex?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would refer to page 40, CEX2. Clearly, this is a significant pressure of £2.192 million on the Welsh Government's commitment to eradicate rough sleeping as part of the COVID-19 pandemic. I just reiterate my comments from yesterday, and that is this a fully funded commitment from the Welsh Government, and has there been an uplift in the local government settlement to accommodate it?
Thank you for that, Alex.
Chair, do you want me to start?
Yes, that's lovely, Jo. Fine.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this has been a significant change, Councillor Williams. As you probably are aware, I've reported it through the year, and I'll ask Martin to come in with any detail. The regulations have changed twice, and it's the Welsh Government's ambition to eradicate homelessness. And as a result, some quite stringent guidelines were put in place at the beginning of COVID, which were updated and strengthened round about July time, which means that we have a duty then to provide temporary and indeed permanent accommodation subsequently for everybody who is homeless. That obviously presented a huge difficulty through COVID. We had up to 200 presentations at the peak of the pandemic at the beginning, where people were quite rightly very frightened, and we had to find a variety of solutions to housing them because we just did not have 200 spare places in accommodation kicking around empty, ready for the pandemic. So we've used a variety of solutions that Martin can give lots of detail on. We've done a huge amount of work working with our partners in housing associations. We've got hotels that we've entered into negotiation with. We've got Airbnb, we've got the pods that you will have seen, some of which, and we've still got floor sleeping, but some of which the Welsh Government are not necessarily approving. So they don't approve of floor sleeping, they don't approve of the pods. Every single council's having real difficulty with adhering to the new regulations. But what it does mean is that we have to, therefore, going forward, because these regulations aren't just for COVID, they're going forward. It's an ambition of the Welsh Government Cabinet to ensure that that this is rolled out. Means that we have to put significant finance into it. Now, that has been funded up until now for this year. We have put it in as a pressure into the budget because we don't know the answer to your question, whether it will be funded in part, in full. You'll recall me saying this about teachers' pensions, that we had to put it into the budget because we can't be left 2 million short, which will be the cost of this. But I may be coming back to you next year and saying that we have received funds for it in part or in full, but we can't go forward in a budget in that position. There is an indication that there may possibly be an increase in housing support grant, which might negate some of that. So it's the uncertainty I talked about before that's really affecting this one. But I couldn't come to you in all honesty at the moment and say we can go forward with a budget that doesn't have that in. So I don't know if that helps.
Thank you for that, Jill. Alex, you wish to come back?
That certainly does help, Jill, and it underlines my concern about long-term funding for these kinds of budgetary pressures, which are brought about by Welsh Government legislation. So I would like to see a recommendation coming forward from the committee that we support our cabinet alongside the Welsh Local Government Association in lobbying the Welsh Government for a long-term package of support to support these legislative changes, because otherwise we will be in this situation year on year in trying to find significant sums of money in the millions, not just the thousands that we've been talking about in other budgetary pressures, to accommodate these kinds of significant expenditure. We all support the ambition of removing homelessness and rough sleeping on our doorsteps. None of us would want to see that, but we as a local authority must ensure that we have the funding to be able to do that properly and without affecting our other local government services.
Thank you for that, Alex. Next question I have now is on CEX3 from Jane Gebby. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. It's all right. I'm trying to find it in my paperwork, the exact bit that I'm looking for. I'm sorry. Sorry. We're talking about a new council approach, and CEX3 is a new policy officer. If you actually, I can't remember where it is now, but that you actually talk about a new policy officer, but yet you're reducing HR function, and HR function is all about policy. So I really don't understand why we're doing one and getting rid of somebody else. It just doesn't make any sense.
Page 40.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy to come in on that, Chair, for me.
Thank you, Mark.
You're on mute, Chair, but I assume you're asking me in. Thank you. A couple of things, Councillor Gebby, first of all. I mean, they are very different things. I mean, the HR would be dealing primarily, of course, with internal policies, maybe staff policies. What we're talking about here, and it was reflected a little bit in some of the conversation yesterday on the local government elections bill, is that we also have a plethora of need to respond to various bills such as that and the Wellbeing of the Future Generations Act. And in addition, the post talks about also having a research and development function. So in fact, what this is, just to be clear, is we already have an existing officer doing part of this role, paid for at the moment by a health grant in the main, a chap called Steve Davis. That grant ends at the end of March. And I think it's been pretty clear, because we have a very lean management structure, that the requirement to have someone who can help respond to the kind of legislative demands that I've indicated, but also help on some of the recovery issues that we've talked about, has become very apparent, and it's been invaluable over the last 6 months or so that we've had this resource available. So they are two very different things, though the general point you make I understand. But within the Chief Executive's Directorate, I think 90% of the budget is staffing. So both in terms of growth, but also in terms of savings, there's almost inevitability that some of it will touch upon staffing.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. You wish to come back, Jane?
No, thank you, Chair. That's lovely answered. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Jane. Right, I've got John Paul Blundell now, CEX4.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. CEX4, you talk about the ICT digital strategy licenses and obviously the budget pressure coming from that. With the adage of every debit there is a credit, surely then if our ICT bills are going up because we're all working from home, then surely the cost to run the Civic should go down and the two should mirror each other and cancel each other out in a way. Thank you.
Thank you, John Paul. Anybody wish to comment?
Yes, Chair, I'll come in, and then Martin, I'm sure, will come in with more detail. They're not the same thing, Councillor Blundell. This is about our licences, and there's never been a more important time to make sure that the resilience of our network and our ability to work online is funded. And if I'm honest, we are in the hands of the IT giants on some of this, and particularly Microsoft, and it's one of those things that the cost of the licenses has gone up, quite excessively. Well, not excessively, it's gone up more than we were expecting. So the running costs of the sort of machinery and all the rest of it is minimal, and that we would save in terms of the Civic and Ravenscourt and all the other offices. This is about licenses, which is something different. So Martin, do you want to add to that?
Yes, Jill, I think you've been quite eloquent in terms of that. In terms of the question, the cost of licenses, irrespective of on the premises, we found ourselves in quite a fortunate position due to our procurement timescales. Just over 3 years ago now, that we locked into a low-level price for Microsoft. Well, during that period of time, Microsoft has then moved their pricing model to a cloud-based service, which has seen exponential growth in terms of the license costs in comparison to on-premise. So they basically forced our hand to move to the cloud alongside with all of the other 22 LAs. It has been raised at an all Wales level in terms of the price increases, but this is what it is when you after sort of consumer cloud service. So whether we're on premise, working in civics, or working at home as we are, all officers are, the cost is still the same, unfortunately.
Thank you for that, Martin. Does that answer your question, John Paul?
Yeah, no, it's exactly why I asked the question.
Yeah,
exactly.
That was all. Exactly what I expected as well. Right, we'll now move on to the budget cuts, or shall we say proposed cuts. I've got Councillor Matthew Loisy on CEX2.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, the removal of the no cost to the user pest control service worries me on public health grounds. Clearly, it's something that perhaps some people can afford to pay for privately, but for many people, it will mean the difference between having no pest control or actually seeking help. And by having no pest control, this could cause a public health issue. The money saved is in the region of £60,000. However, would the chief exec please be able to look at a model that would protect those on benefits, housing benefit, whatever, so that at least those that cannot afford to pay receive a service, whilst those that can afford to pay can go their own way. I think it is a valuable service, and one that we have an obligation on public health grounds to continue, and would like to look at saving that service. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Matthew. I've got Councillor Janice Gregory, beg your pardon. Janice Lewis has indicated on this one as well, so perhaps you could ask your question.
Yeah,
Janice.
thank you, Chair. It is quite a concern to me because I have experienced rats in the house. It's not nice. It's a very anxious time. It's extremely anxious, and I can't see why it needs to be taken off. Really, it's a health hazard. It's a health and safety hazard, not only to the person suffering from the rat infestation, but the surrounding area, because if the rats are not cleared, then they will go somewhere else and multiply. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Janice. Who would like to respond to this?
If I come in initially, Chair.
I was going to say, do you want me to?
Jill, can I just say a few words and then bring you in? I just wanted to make the point really, because it may some members may have missed it, but this was subject to a cabinet report on Tuesday of this week, which potentially has changed the position on this. So it's probably helpful if Jill updates you on the current position and explain where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, the cabinet report came forward on Tuesday. It's got a lot of detail in there about other councils and how they deliver the service. There were 3 options put forward. The one that's in the MTFS in front of you today is option 1, which would be to remove the service. Now, at least half the local authorities in Wales don't provide the service. It's not a mandatory service. Residents are expected to simply phone a pest control contractor and get their own service. Some others provide a service for free. Some provide a service which is chargeable, and there are councils that provide service and give a discount for those on benefits, something that Councillor Voisey referred to. The option to continue to provide the contract in the way that we currently do our current contractor has said would be extremely expensive, and I'm not even sure if they will take the contract again on the basis that they have a huge number of abortive calls because the service is completely free. So what Cabinet have asked us to do is go away and revisit the options to see what sort of service could be provided, to talk to SRS. They provide the service in Cardiff and the Vale, and they're obviously part of our shared service, and but they won't take the service while it's completely free because the calls are so high. And the level of abortive calls, as I say, are so high that it is not cost effective for them to do so. So we're going away to revisit the options. So I think that in terms of the MTFS, then this would be one that would have to come out as a proposal for a saving of 63k, because that option wasn't chosen by Cabinet on Tuesday.
Thank you, Jill. I was at Cabinet and was aware of that, but I think it's important that members heard it from yourself on that. On CEX5, I've got Councillor John Spanswick. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, CEX5, and this may be, well, not maybe, is one of the ones that further information is needed to be clear, because the cut of 65k is only 4% of the budget, but the narrative as regards the impact spreads across the wide areas. It's talking about failure to meet statutory deadlines with statement of accounts, negative feedback from auditors, but then it talks about delays with increased time taken to deal with council tax and housing benefit, which basically is not acceptable, because some of the people that rely on their housing benefit or council tax being processed quickly It definitely doesn't need to be delayed any further than what the time scale is now. But that 65k is either plus one pretty well paid job or two reasonably paid jobs. And I accept we can't go identifying where there may be cuts or maybe the posts to go. And that may need to be a confidential answer, but that's the type of thing we need to know exactly what we're talking about, because two jobs or one job surely doesn't cover all those areas and can affect all those areas. It's almost as if some of the impact, we've asked in the past to have detail on impact, but let's not try to frighten us as well with the impact. Let's be clear and blunt and straight to the point with the impact.
Chair, do you want me to pick that up?
Yes, over to you, Jill.
I mean, as members will know, there's an impact of every single saving cut, efficiency generally. What we've done is like every directorate, we've looked at every single area. We've tried to find where we can make savings. We've still got to make savings, as you've heard me say, at a macro level. So in terms of finance, what we've looked at is whether we can provide a restructuring that will not necessarily result in redundancies, but that we can move services and functions around in order to create this saving. And we believe that we can deliver this saving. There will inevitably, where you reduce staff and you have the same volume or increased volume, it's an inevitability that there's a risk that things will be slower. And you've heard the Chief Executive say that as we get leaner and we're dealing with a pandemic at the same time, services will inevitably be delayed. So I mean, it's just a straight fact that savings or cuts to the number of people we've got with the same volume of demand will result in longer timescales, unless we can find some other way of doing things through digital, which obviously is being explored. So I believe this is a deliverable saving, but you would expect me to say that there inevitably will be some impact.
Thank you very much, Jill. Right, all right, John.
I'd just like to make it clear, Chair, that I'm not supporting anything that's going to delay councillor housing benefit claims.
Right.
So we need to be clear.
Yeah.
What we're talking about, and I'm still not clear really. How it's a reduction in staffing budgets, but yet it's not going to affect any staff. Well, it is going to affect staff. Okay.
That's noted, John. Thank you. Now, I've got Councillor Mike Clark, who indicated in the earlier meeting, but it's a general overall statement. So I'm going to ask Councillor Nora Clark, who's come in on the messaging. You want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I think Jill answered that one on excuse me, on CEX 2. But I just wanted to pick up what Cabinet Member Danisha Patel actually did say in the Cabinet on Tuesday, which I thought was quite important, was who actually owns a rat. And I thought that was quite a good piece of information, because you don't own a rat, you own a dog or you own a cat, but you do not own a rat. It's always somebody else's rat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that enlightening remark, Councillor Clark. You're quite right. Who does own them? Councillor Ross Penhale Thomas.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I know a couple of people who own rats, but that's for their purposes. Yeah, just on CEX2, I'm actually really pleased to see the Cabinet report come forward. It's very clear to me that we are thinking outside of the box, which is good, because obviously the initial recommendation was that we remove this, and I know this has been on the Council's agenda for some time, as you will, Chair. From the Council Cabinet report, I see that the service, in terms of its uptake, is very popular, but in terms of outcomes is very unpopular. So I'm just wondering, certainly from my perspective as a ward member, I send in referrals to ask for sewer baiting on a very regular basis. I can't say that after that's been undertaken, I go out and count the number of rats that are seen, and I don't imagine residents do either. But I'm just wondering how we actually evaluate the effectiveness of that service. Is it as raw or as crude as the number of referrals that come in thereafter? I'm just wondering how we evaluate the effectiveness of that service, really.
Thank you for that, Ross.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm not absolutely certain that we've got anybody on the line qualified to go into sewer baiting in detail, but I'll ask both Martin and Kelly whether they've got any better idea than I have. I'm pretty sure it is on the number of calls from the same area afterwards, but I'll have to defer to greater minds here on sewer baiting.
Can I come in just very quickly there, Jill? In terms of the sewer baiting, that's paid for by Welsh Water and managed through the shared regulatory services. And I think in terms of the performance, it's based on call-outs, etc. So there's no explicit PI in terms of that, Councillor Thomas. It's about responding to actual complaints from that perspective.
Thank you for that, Martin. All right, Ross?
Yes, yeah, thanks, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Jane Gebby.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question of clarity. I was really pleased to hear about Cabinet and pest control. Could I ask that has an equality impact assessment attached to it? However, you present that to Cabinet next time so that we understand the impact, particularly on those most lower paid and more vulnerable. And the other thing I did wish to ask on the Chief Execs is we have a lot of IT equipment now in people's houses. Who's insuring this IT, please?
Martin, do you want to come in on this? Certainly our public insurance.
All insurance is covered via our corporate insurance policy. In terms of laptops, we actually record those in terms of our central database, so we understand whereabouts for those. Respect that, but all falls under the corporate insurance policy in terms of the equipment, Councillor Gebby.
And can I just remind everybody that there is, of course, a lot of rules and regulations about your own personal use of IT equipment. So I don't want to waste the opportunity to say that we all have a responsibility as well.
Yes, thank you for that, Jill. Thank you, Martin. I've got Councillor Rod Shawn who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. A couple of things, really. First of all, sewer baiting was mentioned, and that is organised by Shared Regulatory Services. It's not a BCBC action, if you like, but they, as you say, they do it in response to calls. The other one I wanted to say, really, was CEX5. We just talked about that and had it explained, if you like. But I'm very reticent, really, as a councillor, to agree to something that may result in a failure to meet statutory deadlines. It's, again, we're back to wording, but I would find it difficult to agree to something that forces us into that position.
All I can do, Chair, is say that as I've said before, that every saving has an impact. What we will do is minimise the effect of it as much as possible, and I've now looked at what I think we might be able to do, and I think perhaps we could amend the narrative in that so that it becomes less threatening. It's not a saving clearly that I want to make personally, but we all have to make a contribution. It is one council, and therefore that's where, you know, wherever we make a contribution, it's going to be staffing issues, isn't it? I have nothing else but staff to make that contribution. So we will take that away and look at the narrative if you're still minded to make that saving. I can see.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Jill. Right, I've got nobody else indicating the. Oh, Mark Shepherd. So over to you, Mark. Just popped up now.
Apologies, Chair. I just I didn't want to leave it hanging there. Just wanted to make sense, really, of how we move this forward. One of the things I said earlier is, you know, we're happy to try and provide any additional information that you require. My plea is to try and be selective, because particularly in sexual care, as Councillor Burnett said earlier, we've got some enormous pressure on managers. It's the same managers that will be preparing the additional information. They're also dealing with care plans for outbreaks of COVID in a number of our care homes, and you wouldn't want us to delay our response to those things. But I'm going to bring, with your permission, Chair, I'd want to bring Kelly in a minute, because I think we've tried to quickly come up with a solution that we hope will allow you to adjourn the meeting today, hopefully receive the selective additional information, and then make progress. Because the last thing any of us want is there to be some sort of democratic deficit and you feel that you haven't got the opportunity. That's genuinely the last thing we want. But it's trying to be pragmatic as well, both in terms of the amount of information and the timescale. So would you be happy if Kelly just made a proposal as well, Chair?
Absolutely. I'm sure the committee would welcome that. Well, all four committees.
Thank you, Chair. We've just had a quick look now within the team, and what you could do is adjourn this meeting today until Monday, but that will be on the basis that as a committee you'd have to get your queries to directors today by the end of the day, to give the directors then, you know, tomorrow and over the weekend to pull together responses. And then subject to member availability, and I haven't checked to see if there are any other committees on Monday, but officer availability to service the meeting, we could have another meeting on Monday for you to comment on the feedback you've had from the directors. That does leave it tight, because your report then with your recommendations is due to be sent out on Tuesday, and there is no scope to amend that. You know, the send out is on Tuesday, and there are statutory requirements around that. I've also quickly double checked the dates in the calendar, and we are quite tight in terms of your COSC meeting and the cabinet meetings and then the council meeting, so there isn't any scope to change the dates of those meetings that are already in the calendar.
Well, thank you very much for that, Kelly. I know that all four committees will be very grateful for that. I think providing Meryl is in agreement with this, because I'm quite happy to deal with that today at any time up until whatever time tonight, if necessary. Meryl, would you like to comment on that? I must be absolutely certain that you and your team are comfortable.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I'm happy with the proposal. There aren't any meetings on Mondays. They can be accommodated as long as the officers can attend. I would just suggest that we carry on with the questions on the wider council pressures and proposals and the communities from yesterday, and then if we could and then adjourn rather than adjourn before then, if that's
absolutely. Well, I wasn't suggesting adjourning now. I was just checking that process would be acceptable to you. We are now going to move to the council-wide pressures and
Chair, if I may,
proposal.
Sorry, if I may, I did indicate that I'd like to speak. Just a quick question, if I may, and that is, if what has already been said, that BREP has already received the information which we require, why would it require officers to prepare any further reports? I don't sit on BREP, so it's just an inquiry. If they've received the information, then surely that can just be circulated to all members.
I think, Councillor Williams, if I may, Chair, Councillor Williams, in some cases that may be true. They've certainly received additional information. It may also be the case that in some cases BREP didn't seem to require the additional information, and that may be where we need to produce additional reports if BREP didn't deem that they required it and you do.
Okay, Alex, let's answer your question. I take it that the committee are all in favour of meeting on Monday and producing any further questions. I've had nobody gainsaying, so that's what we will do. We'll now move on very quickly to the council-wide budget pressures. No one has indicated so far on these, other than the fire precept, and I think that was John Paul.
Yes, so when you said no one had asked, I put in speak, and then you said my name, so there we are. My question is about the fire authority. Obviously, there's a budget pressure. It's not one we set ourselves. Obviously, the Councillor White and Councillor Shaw elaborated in our pre-meeting about that. But what I was going to say, isn't it time now that the fire authority's precept goes on the council tax bill like the police does, and they get to set it, and we don't have to give them the money, and so it no longer becomes a pressure for us? Surely that's time for the fire authority to follow the police in that matter. Just a question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. The regulations don't allow that. It isn't the same as the police. It's not a precept. So it has to be done in the same way. We do draw attention to the amount in the MTFS, but that's the way we have to handle it. As you probably know, I drafted a letter to go to the fire authority asking about the increase. We've had a letter back, and we have two councillors on that fire authority, and they can make those representations when they go. But we're pretty much stuck with it, which is a difficult position to be in.
Thank you for that, Jill. It's pretty clear that we can do absolutely nothing about that. Right, I've got Councillor John Spanswick who wants to speak. John?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Are we on the general sort of council-wide things now? Can I have four you moved it, Chair? Sorry, you moved it?
It's got a life of its own. Sorry, John. Yeah, it's on anything on council-wide. There are only four, yeah. 2 pressures, 2 reductions, so just carry on.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm talking about the general report. I got 4 points on the general report. I went through in the pre-meeting.
If you want to bring it up now, yes.
Well, I'll just quickly have it away then. Is page 25. It's table 3, and it's looking at future years, best scenario, worst case scenario. We are a little bit risk averse from the authority, but the glass is half full, not half empty, and the best scenario we're looking for in future years is plus 1%. Hopefully it'll be better than that. It's plus 4.3 this year, so let's not quite be so gloomy, and maybe the glass is half full. That's page 25. There's more comment than a question. Page 26, fees and charges will increase for the statutory minimum, obviously plus 1%. Do we really need to increase fees and charges this year? And it's no good. I hope I don't get the answer. Or tell me where else we're going to save that money, because the council tax figure is not fixed yet. It was 4.5. We now look at 3.9. It could be 4.1. So that's a floating figure. So there's a serious option that fees and charges could be frozen this year. Maybe that will help to send out a message to the people out there that we are listening a little bit. Page 29. There's the true picture. Seen it many years before. Every Directorate Department Communities receiving a net increase in their budgets. I think the only one year the communities receiving increases because of a change in the structure of the council. But yet again, communities, albeit a small amount, but if they didn't have to save that 300,000 for the cat, or if that was still in there, they may almost balance up from last year. But yet again, communities being cut. Common story. And the last one, page 31, and I may have got this wrong, but I looked yesterday on paragraph 4.19.3. There's the Public Realm Fund, and it talks about an annual £2 million Public Realm Fund, which is great. But at the moment, unless I haven't looked right in the right place, I can't find it in next year's budget anywhere. Not called Public Realm Fund, at least. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, John. I'm sure Jill will be able to clarify that point for you.
Yes, okay. I'll start off, and others may want to come in, obviously. In terms of the estimates and assumptions, I think we've, ever since I've been at the council this time, anyhow, the estimate has always been -3 with the, as you call it, the half empty glass. It's only really since we had a decent settlement last year, and that's been repeated this year, that I suppose we've revised our estimates. We don't feel that we can go any more positive than that, because all the indications of the pandemic, the challenges, the fiscal position across the country doesn't necessarily lead you to think that there's got to be a lot of money coming into the public sector. So we've got to stay. We've moved significantly, I think, in this MTFS. But I think we've got to be realistic, and a cash flat settlement is probably the right place to start. If we continue and there are a run of better settlements, then obviously we'll be coming back to you and saying we think we've got the confidence to revise this. But I think we'd be foolish at this stage, just on the back of 2 settlements, one of which is the most incredible year that most of us will have experienced, to actually revise them any further. So that's where we are on that. In terms of fees and charges, that is, there are huge pressures. In truth, some of the fees and charges are not coming in at all. In terms of things that I've mentioned before, car parking and charges for all sorts of things. But I'll ask directors to comment on that. But it would put an additional significant pressure on the budget if we didn't increase those in line with inflation. In terms of the net increase in budgets, I mean, the whole process has gone on since May, and there are various savings and various pressures put forward. There are significant pressures in some directorates, and I think that the level of grant income and supplementary income that comes into communities needs to be taken into account as well. The Public Realm Fund is a recurring figure, around about 2 million. It is going forward. It is being spent primarily in communities, even though it's public realm, and there are things, I think, from other directorates that could be spent out of public realm, but it has been, up until now, spent in communities, as has the Investing in Communities Fund, the capital fund that was set aside from underspends in previous years, the 2 million. So I think that those, if they're not clear in the budget, then we'll come back to you, Councillor Spanswick, to point to the relevant bit. But they are, I can assure you that they are in the budget for next year on a recurring basis. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on the back of that.
I can, Chair. Thank you, Jill, for the public realm. I can't find the £2 million line, but I would, if we can, directors can answer, what is the impact of the fees and charges? What is that costing? What is that figure?
I haven't got it in front of me, Councillor Spanswick. I'll come back to you.
Right, thank you for that, Jill. The leader would like to speak, please, and then Debbie next then.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As Jill has just repeated, there is an investment, and it is largely in community services, community directorate services, in terms of the Public Realm Fund of £2 million. So I hope in future, when Councillor Spanswick talks about this topic, as I'm sure he will again, Chair, then he will reflect on that in his contributions to meetings. I think it's a fair question to ask about the fees and charges, but certainly it's a principle that all members have agreed to in the medium-term financial strategy, that we will increase fees and charges at that rate. We can, of course, consider that principle, but it is one that's part of our medium-term financial strategy, along with a number of other principles around seeking efficiency, fairness, etc. Just to finally add that I think Councillor Spanswick makes a very important point around the uncertainty around the revenue support grant, and that is our biggest uncertainty, isn't it? Is how much that is going to be. But if we do have further consequentials, if we do have a better revenue consequential from Welsh Government than we currently anticipate, then certainly we will look at some of these savings, particularly the savings that that members have identified today, the cuts that members have identified, and we'll consider the impact on council tax as well, if that settlement, if additional funding does come to the authority. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Hugh. Every area needs a champion, you see, so and we're all left in no doubt with John.
That's right.
I'm going to bring in Debbie Exton now, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really to comment on Councillor Spanswick's question about where the public realm fund is sitting. This was an agreed budget pressure for last financial year, so it's actually in the Communities Directorate base budget already, so that will carry forward. So on table 6, under the communities line, it's actually within the first column, the 28,579, so it's within there already, so it won't show up as a new budget pressure because it's a recurrent one from a previous year.
Thank you very much for that, Debbie. Right, I don't have anybody else that wishes to speak at this point. So I'm going to hand over to Meryl now, so that we're all very clear exactly what point we're at. I think we have come to the end of this. We possibly could be moving now, I think, to the communities, resuming the communities, pausing this one until Monday and moving to communities for the questions that weren't able to be asked yesterday. Meryl?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to propose, perhaps you've mentioned in the social services part of the meeting earlier that you thought it was just the one proposal that wanted extra information for directors' information. Do you want to do the same? Are there any items within the second part of the meeting that members wish to highlight as needing extra information? And then perhaps we go on, and the wider council reductions as well, before we go on to the community section and hand over to the other chair.
Have you identified anything in this because from what I can see,
I don't think so, but I wanted to be sure with members while they've still got the chance. That's all.
I think the pest control was of great concern, but given that the cabinet met and have put it on hold, that is no longer, and I think John has been answered now for this public realm. I haven't made any notes of anything that wasn't answered to the satisfaction, but I'm happy to be corrected. John.
Chair.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, see, expect public realm. I'll check the detailed budget book when it comes to it, make sure there's a line there. 2 million. CEX5. Thanks, Jill, for the explanation you gave. But as Councillor Shaw says, well, it talks about potential failure to meet statutory deadlines, and I'm not happy with this council tax and housing benefit claims possibly being delayed. Whether there needs to be a confidential reply, but I'd like to know how many staff it affects and where those. I'd like more detail. I'm not clear on the effects, and it needs to be clarified.
Okay. Chair, could I just respond, because I have a confidential restructure that's being finalised by HR, and I'm not sure that it would be appropriate. We haven't talked to staff about it yet, but I have agreed to change the narrative on that to make it much less of a risk, because I think we can do that without exposing ourselves to risk.
Thank you for that, Jill. Jill, could you just remind me what 1% on the council tax actually raises as revenue?
750.
Okay, thank you for that. I know it goes up every year, the percentage, but I wasn't sure the exact amount. Right, are you happy with that, John? You've got enough information?
Not really, Chair, because is it one staff, two staff? It's still putting pressure on existing staff.
It's very difficult if people haven't been told, isn't it? I understand it to be 65,000. Is that right, John?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I think you could draw your own conclusions from that, John. But that was the reason I was asking about the percentage on the.
It's not as simple as just taking one post. The restructuring, regrades, and take.
I appreciate that, Jill. That's why I was saying it's really about the amount as opposed to the actual bodies, as it were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Chair. I think we've got remaining questions from yesterday. I don't know if the chair wants to switch back, or if he's happy for me to just read out and ask the members who indicated they wanted to have their questions from yesterday.
Over to you, John Paul.
Sorry, yeah, Cheryl's on mute, so is
No, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've got the list, so we can just carry on.
From COM 3, I think, Chair, to COM 3.
I've got one before that because Councillor Janice Lewis did have a supplementary on cemeteries. I don't know if she still wants to ask that, which was on COM 1, but I don't know if she's.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to sort of say that St Bride's Community Council actually shares the responsibility of Sand Cemetery's cutting of the grass with the council. So just to let you know on that, we are working together. Okay, thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Councillor. Yes, next one. It is you, Councillor Pennell Thomas. You're up.
Oh, Chair, you're too good to me. Thanks very much. Yeah, COM 3. Yeah, I just obviously it's not an immediate budget pressure, but it's certainly the forward direction of travel. It seems. Just a little bit concerned, really, about our inability to take on feasibility studies. Many of the things happening in the county borough at this point in time actually wouldn't have come to fruition without feasibility studies. So that concerns me. And I think the wider point is. Certainly on this budget proposal, is it the case that we know the cost of something but not the value of it? So I'm really concerned that, you know, some of the big things going on in the county borough, certainly in terms of regeneration, would not come about were it not for feasibility studies. And certainly from my perspective, it's the seedling that provides the basis to go on to achieve great success and to leave funding from other sources as well. So I'm just wondering what the mindset is behind that, really. Thanks very much, Chair.
No worries, thank you, Councillor. Janine, I can see you're with us. Oh, Zach, is Zach here? Either of you want to take that question?
Hello, Chair. Yes, I'll take that question if I may. Yeah, it's been incredibly difficult to come up with budget reduction proposals because, of course, that impacts right across the piece in communities, as been discussed earlier. With this one, what this fund is to match fund with other grant sources. That's what we use this for, because a lot of the sources we apply for, you have to have a match fund, sometimes 15, 20, 25%. So what this money allows us to do is to match those funds. Now, that's not to say we won't be carrying out feasibility studies, because we most certainly will. They're a critical part of moving schemes on. But what it means is we won't have as much money available as we did previously. And this is a specified pot that was just for match funding. So we'll have to use the resources that we've got from within the directorate in other ways, Councillor Pennell Thomas, in order to bring schemes forward. What we'll have to do is look more closely at Cardiff Capital Region city deal bids. We'll have to look at what some of the Welsh Government schemes and be more creative in our thinking. I don't think this will stop us moving forward. It just means we'll have to work a little harder, dare I say. Now, the saving is not for a couple of years yet, and there's still quite a lot of regeneration schemes and capital work that's going to be undertaken in the next couple of years. We haven't identified for 2023 what we would use the money for. So what we'll have to do over the next couple of years is think long and hard about our ability to match fund and to bring streams forward, because we certainly won't want to stop what we're doing, especially with our emphasis now on our decarbonisation strategy, the Bridgend master plan. There are a number of initiatives we want to continue with. Yeah, so hopefully that will help.
Okie dokie. Thank you for that. Councillor Pennell Thomas, did you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate that response. Good to get some clarity on exactly what part it sits in. Certainly something to keep an eye on, as I think the director has suggested. I think my broader concern is if we are not stumping up as much cash to help with feasibility studies, what the quality of the feasibility studies might be. So obviously, are we getting bang for our buck in that perspective, really? But yeah, thanks very much, Janine. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think it's a very important issue and one we will keep a keen eye on going forwards there. Councillor Spanswick, you've indicated you wish to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Com1 communities, the £300,000 cuts, we had quite a lot of discussion on it yesterday, and I think it really needs to be clarified. It talks about 3 areas, well, 4 areas to include reduction of grass cutting and reduction of areas to be cut, which is clarified by Zach. The cut process, which I've not got a problem with, where people want it and where communities want it, but let's not make out it's the answer to the £300,000 savings, is not. And there's also about reduction or closure of children's play areas. I haven't got a great deal of faith in the figure in total, with it including this year's 369,000. I'm yet to be convinced of the accuracy of that figure, but it needs to be broken down, and we need, as a scrutiny, to see those figures broken down. What is written in grass cutting areas? What is written in the number of grass cuts? How much to the cut process, including what was asked for yesterday, the cost of maintaining cycling mistake, cycling mistake, parking mistake, and Newbridge Fields, and how much relates to the closure of play areas and the number of play areas possibly to be closed. So that needs breaking down.
Yeah, no problem. That is something that we have asked for. I don't know if Zach has managed to grab the figures today.
No, I think what was asked for was specific figures relating to Newbridge Fields and the exact cost of the contribution that would make towards CAT. I think what Councillor Spanswick's asked for, Chair, is slightly different. He wants a breakdown of the £300,000. To be clear, Chair, if I may, the £300,000 figure is a target. It hasn't got a set, this much will come from CAT, this much will come from the saving on the grass cutting, this much will come from the children's play areas. It's a target, and some of it is what we can influence, but to a degree is outside of our control, as in how many cats we will achieve through the year. And dependent on the variables, we will need to save different amounts from the various areas. So, for example, if the cats go really well, we wouldn't need to save much from the grass cutting or the children's play areas. If we don't get hardly any cats across the line, then we'd need to save more on grass cutting and children's play areas. So I can't provide that, here's the fixed breakdown, because there isn't one. It's a £300,000 target, to be clear.
Yeah, no problem. I don't know if Councillor Spanswick wants to come back, but I did want to say, is it an unrealistic target then to put?
Chair, if I can say, I think personally the target should be reduced, maybe to 50, 100, or spread over the years. It's not going to happen next year. It's unrealistic to keep that there.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Spencer. It was exactly my point. Is it an unrealistic one going forward if we haven't got it broken down in such a way? But Councillor Young, you want to come in on this?
Thanks, Chair. Sorry it takes me so long to come in. So many buttons to push. Look, I don't want to see that target reduced, to be perfectly honest. It's there to protect us. A target is not like a quota, okay? A quota is something that you are expected to reach. A target is something that you can miss as long as you understand why you've missed that target. So Zach is absolutely right. If more CAT transfers actually go through the system, then the less money that we will have to save, to be perfectly honest with you, because we won't be cutting those areas. So I think it is best left alone. I think Councillor Spanswick is absolutely right. We need to monitor it, and we will do that with the processes alongside with the CAT process. So I don't want people to be overly concerned about this. It's a question that we will look at it, monitor it, and we will come back to you with this anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Did anyone else want to say anything on that? Janine, Zach, or are we happy? Or Councillor Spanswick even?
Yeah, Chair, just to endorse what Councillor Young has said on this, it is where we're aiming for. I think we've got a lot of interest in CAT across the borough. We've done an awful lot of work this year, and we're still progressing with work with CATs. I mean, they are incredibly complicated, of course, and we wouldn't put a CAT through until we were very comfortable that everything was in place and the business plan was robust. But that's not to say we can't achieve some more. We have got a target of trying to achieve 10 more CATs this year. That's our target we're aiming for. A lot of interest, a lot of work being done by the team. And the other issue, of course, Councillor Spanswick, if we do reduce that target, then I'm going to have a look for that saving in other areas, and that creates greater pressure in other areas for me. So what I would like to do at this point and suggest is, as Councillor Young has suggested, we keep it in and that we monitor it very carefully, and that we come back to you if we think that we're nowhere near it. We'll have to monitor it anyway, because we need to look to achieve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jenny. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll revisit this, I think, when we've had that further information on My Stake Welfare Park and New Bridgefield. The leader wishes to come in. Is it on this point, leader? I'm assuming it is.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing me in. I just wanted to make the point that we are reviewing our strategy for children's play areas. So there's a number of savings in that line. We are committed, as I'm sure all members are, to working with our town and community councils in particular to actually improve our children's play offer. That is the vision, and we will work with town and community councils. I know the town and community council that you're a member of has been very forward thinking in this regard. But we can do that across the county borough. We can retain our children's play areas and see investment in those, and that is what we look to do, and we'll bring that additional information back to members as soon as that is available. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Leader. Nora, Councillor Clark, sorry, you wish to come in on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just picking up on what the leader has mentioned, and it was mentioned yesterday about town and community councils helping with play areas, etc., and other things, of course. But the point has already been made today that town and community councils have already put in their precept for this year, and if you haven't put in an amount for play areas, then what can you do? You know, you've got no money to put towards children's play areas because you haven't precepted for them. So again, you know, we've got to be ahead of the game. And I have mentioned this many times, that, you know, we need to know where we are before town and community councils put in their precept.
Fabulous. Yes, that was a point made yesterday, and something that we've discussed previously. So I think that point's been well made. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Now, after our little diversion to Com 1 again, we're going back to Com 3 with Councillor Shaw. Councillor Shaw, you have a question on Com 3 on page 43.
I do indeed, Chair. Thank you very much. Yes, I endorse what Councillor Penhale Thomas was saying, that there were some concerns about this particular issue. For me, I think if you look at the title, Strategic Regeneration Fund, the first two words are highly important in terms of MCFS. But I do also note that yesterday's Cabinet decision, the Local Government and Elections Bill paper was endorsed, and in there is guidance on collaborative working and feasibility studies, and indeed on this report on section 7.3, the way we meet our obligations under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act for the 5 ways of working includes collaboration, and savings generated from collaboration and integrated working is mentioned. There's a huge body, if you like, of stuff that moves us into the direction of collaboration, and this seems to be wholeheartedly taken a section of that, of our ability to do that. And I do know how much money, how much is leveraged by this fund. So I do express concerns on this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for expressing those concerns. Janine, did you want to answer or reply to Councillor Shaw? Or?
Yes, of course. Yes, please let me. Yeah, it is of a concern. We are concerned about this moving forward, but we really have to look for new ways of working with this. I think the new bill that's come through and the regional working, especially with strategic planning and strategic transport, will just complement what we're already doing, to be fair. When we are looking at schemes, we do work with adjoining neighbour authorities, and we do work with the Cardiff Capital region more widely. So if anything, I think the creation of the CCR might open up opportunities for us rather than it work the other way. And we do work in this strategic way. So I think the word Strategic Regeneration Fund, that means something different to us than literally regional working. There's two different interpretations, I think. Strategic for us is about looking at long-term future as well as working with across the regions. And absolutely, one thing we will be continuing to do in Bridgend is being strategic with our economic development, because that's the only way that we're going to ensure a robust economic recovery after this pandemic and move the borough on, is by having that strategic view. One of the things that we've talked about is putting together again for Bridgend a renewed economic development strategy for the next 10 years to complement that 2030 decarbonisation strategy we have, and to give us that strategic 10-year plan of what we want to do, and to highlight some of the great projects that we've already got in train and which will make an impact to our economy. So a lot of that work is being done. So hopefully that will mitigate some of these budget pressures. And let me reassure you, any feasibility we do will be of good quality. I wouldn't have it any other way. It has to be good quality. We will make the right decisions for Bridgend, and we will communicate those with you. I hope that reassures you, Councillor Shaw.
Councillor Shaw, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just briefly. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think the good thing is it's indicated for 23-24, so we've got a year or two to be able to consider, the impact of this particular thing and hopefully mitigate it before it takes effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. I look forward to scrutinising all that work going forward, Janine. Should be fabulous. Jill, you want to come in?
Yeah, just to add, if I could, Chair, to what Janine has said, this was always planned that it would cease at this point, but there are other feasibility pots that will more than adequately, I think, replace it, and it's just it was only ever intended to be for this period. So there are corporate feasibility funds in the earmarked reserves and such like that I think we will build up over the next couple of years. So just wanted to reassure members.
Thank you very much, Jill, for that. Does anyone else wish to come in on this before we move on? I'm just conscious of time. Most of us have been here 4 hours.
Chair, can I just ask a quick question?
Of course you can, John.
I know I'm going back on Grump's Com one. If we're going to have further questions or answers to questions in readiness for next week, the question I'd like to ask in Com one, then I think Janine, the director, said there's possibly 10 interesting cats over the next year. Zach yesterday said they have costs for every site. So at the very least, can we see that, ready for next week, the total cost if all those 10 take place, so we can see cost per site multiplied by the number of expressions of interest for the next year, possibilities.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure Mel will make note of that, and Zach and Janine can do their best to give us those answers. Thank you very much for that. So I muted myself. I knew I did it. All right, we're going to move on now to Com 4, and I have Councillor Gifford. Councillor Gifford, you're on for Com 4. You still here? Hope you are. Right. Okay. It's not coming in. I'm not on mute, so. Janine, yes.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Do you mind if I come back to Councillor Spanswick on that question about,
Go ahead.
about
Councillor
the 10
Gifford might
cats?
turn up by then.
Yeah, indeed. I think just to reiterate on what Zach has said, Councillor Spanswick, our target is to get 10 more cuts through this year. That's the target we're aiming for, and that's the work we're doing now. But whether we will have the exact figures of what the savings could be from those cuts, because the work has been undertaken now, and the business plans are being prepared, and we're working with with those community groups now in order to get all of that information prepared. So whether we have that information now or whether we will have it later, that's a difficulty, I think, because we are still working on those schemes. I mean, it's January, and we've got the next year to deliver them. So whilst we've got a lot of interest and our target is 10, that I'm not sure some of that data is going to be available now. It will definitely be available later on in the year when we've done that work with them. But I think that's probably where we are.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we'll look at that again going forward. Thank you for that, Jean. That's fine, Councillor Phil White. You're more than welcome to leave if you wish. Councillor Gifford, are you back with us, or shall we move on, see if you can come back?
He is listed, Chair.
This is why I double check, because the picture up. So okay, so we'll move on then. He can come back if he so wishes.
Be very quiet all meeting, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanswick. Okay, I haven't got anyone then for COM 5 down at the moment. Does anyone have any questions on COM 5 on Appendix B? I'm not seeing anyone type in.
I'm happy to make a comment if relevant, Chair.
Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, just to let members know, I mean, it is a green one. Probably the biggest risk associated with leaving the building is we have to set aside, a budget for delapse costs in order to hand it over in a fit state as we exit the lease. We've been doing survey works associated with the delapse, and all indications are that everything is on budget. So it's one that's going well. So, it's relatively straightforward and progressing well.
That's good to hear. Thank you for that, Zach. Right then, we'll move on to COM 6 because no one's indicating they wish to speak. Councillor Spanswick, I have you down for COM 6. I think it was a clarification.
It was. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, COM 6, the fire suppression equipment for Tonley Depot, 60k. I'm just clarifying that we own the depot or not. Because if so, all the much easier to bring it back in-house.
We do own the depot, Councillor Spanswick.
Thank you, Zach. I will look forward to a BCBC sign on
it. Okay, thank you for that, Roy. Councillor Pennell Thomas. He's on an urgent phone call at the moment. Well, we can come back to him at the end if he's finished, and obviously he has to take over to do the recommendations from his own scrutiny committee, so I hope he's finished by then. Councillor Spanswick, you are next on my list again for COM 7. I think this was another clarification one.
It was. I think I answered it myself at the end because the report mentions a Welsh Government grant for the vehicle. So the saving was in the current contract, but I could just clarify to make sure I understand it right.
Zach?
Yeah, so Chair and Councillor Spanswick on this one. So effectively, we were fortunately successful with some funding for this particular service, and what that's effectively meant is we are able to pay for some vehicles that Kia will effectively use for the remainder of the current contract with the AHP service, so they can effectively let go of their existing ones. They obviously have a saving as a result of that, which will pass back to us through our revenue in the current contract, and that's what's displayed as the MTFS saving there. But also at the end of the current contract, because there's only a few years to go now, we get to own those vehicles for future contracts or services, however they're provided as well. So it's just effectively a beneficial effect of a successful grant claim to a Welsh Government that we made. Interestingly, as it happens on that one, with the variation, our legal department just sent through the final version of the variation contract today, which we're just sending off. So again, progressing well and will be delivered.
Chair, can I just clarify the vehicle?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know it's not, but it is the budget. Just clarification of the type of vehicle, because the ones that Kia have been using with manhandling HP bags into a back van, in no way is it healthy. I'd read the thing what they have to go through. So I'd just like to clarify how this vehicle is fit for purpose and it won't be manhandling bags out the back of vans into other vehicles and other places.
Yeah. Okay. I think outside of this meeting, if Councillor Spanswick likes, I'll send him the full vehicle spec if he's interested, and that'll answer that question.
Appreciate that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that should be. I'm sure he'll enjoy reading that. I haven't got anyone else for Com 7, and I haven't got anyone else for Com 8. Does anyone have any final questions? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question on Com 8 about the rollout of the LED street lighting. How far of, what percentage of the borough has now got the LED lighting, please?
Zach?
Yeah. I wish my memory was a bit better because I had this conversation with Colin Hill 2 days ago and I'm struggling to remember the number. The vast majority are done now. So we've got roughly circa 20,000 streetlights. And I think, but please don't hold me to it, it's about 4,000 still to go, 3,000 or 4,000 still to go. I can get you the exact number. I was told it about 2 days ago, but I didn't scribble it down at the time and it slipped out of my mind. But yes, we're well on our way. We're the vast majority of the way through the rollout. And we're continuing with the last, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 out of 20,000. I can confirm the exact number outside of the meeting, but it's of that order. So.
Thanks, Zach. That's that's quite a good rolling on. But I would be interested to know how many we're left to do. That would be great. Thanks very much.
I'm sure it's 3,000 or 4,000 out of the 20.
Yeah, not many then. Thanks.
Yes, I can confirm, and as long as they don't flash on and off all night, we'll be very happy with the rollout. So.
It's very happy indeed. Thank you, Zach, for that. Again, I have no one else indicating. If you wish to have any questions, ask any questions on the community's budget, please speak now or forever hold your peace.
Chair, please, could I?
Yeah, go on, Councillor Spencer.
It's something that I forgot from before you took over on Chair, but it'll apply to this as well. I'd never answered about the fees and charges. I don't think. She said we was going to pass it to each director. If we didn't have the increase in fees and charges, how much that would be? And maybe it might apply to this director more than others, the car parking income, but it was the percent, is whether or not we increase fees and charges across the council. Whether that's a question for next week, I'm not sure.
Chair, if I just say some of those will already have been in train and will have been put forward as increases. Some of them are automatic, but we haven't actually got the figure. I said we'd come back to Councillor Spanswick, I believe.
Okay, that's fine. That's great. Thank you for that, Jill. Okay, I've got no one else indicating. Yes, Councillor Pam Davis, you're more than welcome to speak.
Thank you very much. I would like the spec of the vehicle as well from Zach. Leave the women out because I am very interested in cars and upwards. I want to know that will those vehicles be any good by the time the contract has come to an end? Because I think Howell said about this when we first took the Kia contract on, which is quite a while ago now, and he said the benefit is we keep the vehicles, and I said they will be cream crackered by the time they have gone through all the rounds. I'd also like to know, a couple of years ago, we spoke about the Waterston depot, and there were tractors down there, and I think we asked for at least one of them, I think there was 3, one of them to be retained, because that is a flood area, it's not far from the river, and if you've got to tow anybody out, it's well known that they're better than anything. So I'd like to know if we did retain one of those tractors, and also, obviously, the mileage that the vehicles are doing with the Kia contract. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor Pam Davis. I think Zach can send it to Meryl, the specs, and Meryl can send it out to the committee. I'm sure many other members will be interested as well. But Zach, on the other points, do you wish to come in?
Yeah, I'm completely unaware of that tractor conversation. I've got to admit that's news to me. At the Waterton depot, we do have some JCBs that the highways departments use in various highways activity, including flooding response. So we certainly have the kit that we need there in terms of the highways teams. Tractors as such tend to be in use with the Parks Department, and they sit generally in the Bryn Cefn depot as opposed to Waterton. So I'm not quite sure what that tractor conversation related to. Yes, specs of the vehicle, we can send that out, no problem at all. Obviously it's purpose-built vehicles for the AHP collection, so designed with the task in mind, so to speak. In terms of what happens to vehicles at the end of the Kia contract, generally we won't own the whole fleet of vehicles at the end of the Kia contract, and quite rightly, they will generally be at the end of their useful life, because that's how you typically put out a waste contract. You'll aim it for the end of a vehicle lifespan to get the most optimum price from the contract. So yes, we wouldn't be having those back from Kia. They're Kia's vehicles, but these AHP ones alone are separate and different because they've been funded through this funding from Welsh Government, and obviously not bought at this, or at least from the very start of the contract. They're only coming in now in 2021, and the contract ends in 24, so they'll still be relatively new when the contract expires, and Kia won't own those ones. Hence, those AHP only ones will transfer to us at the end of the contract, and yes, they won't be worn out because they'll be relatively new at that point.
Thank you for that. We were told that those vehicles would be owned by us. That was one of the benefits, and I remember Howell saying that. And also, have we put it in any thought that when we are buying new vehicles, I'm not saying we're using wheelie bins at the moment because we're not, but are we coming into any thoughts that we would purchase the vehicles with that hook or mechanism on the back for wheelie bins in case in future we do go into wheelie bins? So, is there any forethought for the future on that mechanism and buying vehicles? If we're in the middle of purchasing vehicles, has that thought, and I don't know the difference in the costs of that so-called HGV or whatever it is that we're talking about, but just wondered if there was any forevision for that for the future.
Yeah. Okay. So just for absolute clarity, the bulk of the Kia fleet, excluding these specific AHP absorbent hygiene product collection vehicles that have been paid for by Welsh Government, the rest of the fleet is under Kia's control. They're Kia's vehicles. We do have, and maybe that's what's caused some confusion about ownership, we do have within the contract an option at the end of the contract term. We could buy the Kia vehicles off them if we were to wish to. But quite rightly, as you pointed out, at that point they'll be quite old, and it would be unlikely, I would say, that we'd want to take that option. But they're not our vehicles, so when we're not in the business currently of speccing vehicles. With regard to buying vehicles for future waste collection terms, sort of post 2024, when the current Kia contract expires, obviously if you spec vehicles to be able to pick up wheeled bins, one, there's an additional cost for that, and two, they're also quite difficult to load from a manual handling perspective with sacks because the rave plate's higher at the back. It's getting a bit technical now, but bottom line is you choose what service you want and then buy the vehicles to fit. So if you decided to change to wheelie bins, you'd then buy the right vehicles to pick up wheelie bins. What you wouldn't do is just get them just in case you go down that route, because effectively they wouldn't be very good to use for a sack collection service, and they'd have cost you more if you never actually do that. So you'd make the decision on what the future service looks like first, and then think about what vehicles are needed for the service that you want to put in place.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Hopefully
thank
that's
you
clear.
for that. Yeah, thank you for the explanation. There is no confusion on my part, and I'm sure other councillors can recall this was part of the ideas before we accepted Kia for the contract when it was put to us in council. There was no confusion. Howell said that we would own those vehicles when the contract was finished. And I understand, about the mechanism at the back, etc., but definitely no confusion. And I'm sure there are councillors that remember, as well as We were not told that the call centre was in Torquay or whatever. Nothing was ever mentioned. I had to find that out once we'd accepted the contract, and a neighbour told me that when they rang in about the rubbish collection, the answering service was Torquay. So we were misled then. No confusion, we were misled.
Okay, thank you. I don't really want us to go down into the waste contract again, because there'll be plenty of time for that in the scrutiny, and it's not really part of this budget conversations at this present moment. So I have got Jill who wishes to come in, and Janine. So, Jill, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to manage expectations on the fees and charges, because members of BREP will know that we did a huge exercise on fees and charges across the council, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands, and they all have different rules and regulations. Some are statutory. Some will have increased at different times. So I just wanted to manage expectations as to what people were expecting on that. So if there's a specific fee and charge that there's an issue with, then I need to know that, because it's just prohibitive for me to get anywhere near the thousands of lines. Some of them, as I say, are completely ruled by statute, and it would be just a waste of everybody's time, and I couldn't do it in the time. So I just wanted to raise that. I should have said it at the time I was coming back to Councillor Spanswick.
That's fine, Jill. I'm sure if Councillor Spanswick has any particular ones, he can add them in outside of the meeting. Because I don't, as many have said, we do have a development control meeting at 2, so we will try and make progress on that. Janine, you wanted to come in on, I'm assuming, on Councillor Panic.
Yes, Chair, if I may, and I think you've made the point a little bit earlier, there's a tremendous amount of decisions to be made, the post-24 waste contract going forward, how we will look at that and the services provided. An awful lot of work needs to be done. Very good suggestions by Councillor Davis, but I think where we are at the moment is we want to go away, do that work, and then we can have those discussions at an appropriate time. But to thank you for your interest in that, we will have those discussions at an appropriate time. Thanks, Chair.
Fabulous. I'm sure all council will be have those discussions as well. That'll be something for us all to sink our teeth into. Councillor Gifford, you've returned to us after your phone call. We have you down for COM 4 for a question.
Thanks, Chair, and apologies. Like I say, it was the one moment all day I couldn't participate, and here I am. So apologies for that. I had a question on COM 4. I did ask it yesterday, but I'll repeat it today for the record. Obviously, it was about tourism, and I just basically was curious as to the cost benefit analysis on that, because obviously, you hope in normal times at least that tourism is something that's going to be a money maker and not a cost. And I wonder whether scaling back on a service like that, on promotional consideration like that, will actually lead to us having sort of less money in the pot and in the local economy in the longer run.
Jeannie?
Yes, of course, happy to come back. I think where we are with that, Councillor Gifford, is we really need to baseline our expectations now after this pandemic and look to rebuild our tourism sector and the offer that we have and the consultation work that we're doing. I think where we are is that we feel we could probably do this ourselves as well as the service that's been offered, and that's why we're scaling back the service, because what we're trying to do is to look more regionally at a regional approach and work on some of the communications ourselves, and rightly so, do a cost benefit analysis. I think where we are is we probably don't think we're getting enough benefit from that contract, and especially now during the pandemic, there hasn't been a great deal to offer at this point in time. So what we think is probably prudent is take a look at everything we're doing, have a new operational model going forward and launch that ourselves. So our intention is to cover this work ourselves, in the way that we conduct this communication and marketing more widely, and to use partner organisations from Welsh Government and the city region to assist us in all of that marketing. So more of a regional part buying in the service, I think, is where we want to go.
Thank you for that, Jenny. Councillor Gifford, did you want to come back?
Yes, please. And thanks for your response, Janine. I appreciate that. And I would probably be inclined to agree with you that I don't know that we've had the best value for money of current arrangements so far. It sounds to me like I'm quite encouraged by your response and that you'll look at everything and take it all in the round. It sounds to me, though, like it's quite a big bit of work, actually. I know it seems like a fairly small part of a wider picture, the tourism, but actually it's, you know, quite an important bit of work. And so I'm hoping that those proposals, whilst I personally don't sit on Scrutiny 3, would be taken to probably the most relevant Scrutiny Committee to really drill down into actually what can we market about Bridgend County Borough, what do we want out there, and we can really look at that in detail, because I'm thinking if we're just going to almost start again with this area, that we scrutinise it and make sure that it works.
May I come back, Chair?
Of course you can.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's an incredibly important part of our economy, tourism in Bridgend. And one of the things that we measure as a factor of success is the income that's brought in by tourism. You know, that's one of our measurements. So yes, absolutely, we need to ensure that we keep that as robust as possible, that we do attract visitors. Of course, we do footfall counting, albeit in the corporate plan for the next year, we have stopped measuring that because we need to baseline and start again. But no, absolutely, you're right. Tourism is a very important part of our economy, and that's something we want to ensure we get right. Yeah.
No worries. Thank you for that, Jean. And speaking from the scrutiny point of view, I'm sure it's not on our current schedule, but I'm sure it will be going forward after this meeting. Does anyone have any further questions before I hand back to Meryl and we find out what we're doing next? I'm not seeing anyone indicating. Okay, thank you for that, Jane.
Chair, I was just going to
yes,
ask, like we did with the other section for social services and chief execs, can they want extra information for Monday on that they raise them now, you know, so that the directors are aware. I know we've had quite a bit of we've only so far had SSW2, the percentage of fees and charges, the CEX5, which Jill has agreed to change the narrative, amend the narrative, and they talked a lot about COM1, but I don't think there's anything further coming back on COM1 now because of the answers that's been given. So is there anything in the rest of the COMs that they want specifically more information by Monday if we're doing it, and also then we'll do the same for the education questions from yesterday. If there's any additional information, let's be clear before we adjourn what's needed.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Meryl. One thing I think was on COM1, Councillor Walters and Councillor Edwards said they wanted how much of that 300, how much of that reduction is My Estate Welfare Park and how much is part of Newbridge Fields, and if they are part of those. I think that was definitely one from COM1, and no surprise.
Chair,
Yes,
may I jump in? Just on COM1, just for absolute clarity, there is no breakdown of what makes up that £300,000 cost. It's a target out of the overall budget, and we're not entirely in control as to which facilities will CAT or not. But what we can provide is, were Newbridge Fields to CAT, were My Estate Welfare Park to CAT, then this is what that would save us from the budget, which I think is what was fundamentally being asked. What I can't say is that's definitely in the £300,000 or this isn't. It's a case of we're trying to get enough things through to make a £300,000 saving. But I can certainly give the breakdowns for those individual locations to the members.
Yeah, sorry, I must have misspoke there. Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Thank you, Zach. Councillor Waters has removed her question. No surprise, Councillor Spanswick on COM1.
Just to clarify, Chair, what basically was Zach said there. is if we could have a list then, if we don't know, we're not clear which CAT process might proceed. So if you could have a list of all expressions of interest of the different clubs, community councils who express interest in CAT in the particular site and the cost per site. So that we could see the maximum amount then that could be saved by CAT if everyone succeeded. And it just gives us an idea of what we're talking about. So all the CAT.
It's been previously published. I know Councillor Spanswick will argue with the figures because we've had before COVID came along, we had a number of face-to-face meetings in terms of the way it's calculated, because we take our total budget and divide it down. But yes, it's been previously published, so we can certainly send that around again. What we have is a cost per pitch, cost per rugby pitch, cost per football pitch, cost per bowling green, and then obviously you can, all of the facilities have actually expressed an interest, so we can quite easily say, this would be the total of everything CATted, and that has been previously published when we took previous reports on CAT, but we'll make sure we circulate that again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okie dokie. Jill?
Yes, sorry, Chair, I don't want to prolong the discussion. I just wondered if you could let me have, obviously, very quickly, a list of those fees and charges that you want an answer on, because obviously there are thousands in planning, statutory, social services, client fees, which are agreed differently, licensing, school meals, etc., rent. So I can't possibly go through all those in the time available. Can Councillor Spanswick send me a list of the ones that he wants?
It wasn't a list of anyone in particular. I was looking at the bottom figure, and accept that some are statutory, some are non-statutory, but I'm not charging them. It's just not doing the increase. So whatever the bottom figure is, can that be done? So I haven't got any ones in particular in mind. It's just if we don't increase fees and charges, say from April 21.
We haven't got that. We haven't got that. That's not in our gift. I think is what I'm saying, is that there's only some that would be within our gift, some of which will have increased, some of which won't. So I just need to pin it down, because we've got literally thousands of things that are charged for in the council.
Yeah, but surely we're in control of whether they increase them or not.
No, not all of them. Some are set by statute. I mean, in Claire's area, a lot of them will be set for us.
Is it?
What, the increase?
Yeah.
So we don't know if the increase. I'm confused now.
I understand what Jill's come from. Yeah. Is it possible then to carry on with Councillor Spanswick's point, to get the ones that we are in control of, to say that we can't parking? I understand, like, paying for social care and stuff is set at a certain limit and other things like that, but is it possible to get those that we are in control of, say parking fees and stuff like that, to see what it would cost then? Is that more okay for you there, Councillor Spanswick? Just for a take to Jill.
I don't want to create a massive amount of work. I thought it'd be easy at bottom line, but if it's not so easy, maybe it's something we can't do short term.
What I can do is send you the BREP paper. I think you're on BREP. The exercise that was done on BREP, and perhaps indicate there, and then we can ask the directorates the question, because it obviously I don't do all these. So if we go through the BREP papers, perhaps if you just indicate which ones.
Yeah, if you could send me the paper in case I can't find it. I can remember the paper and there was thousands on it. But
yeah, thanks.
I'm trying to relate some.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Yes, that's fine. Okay. Zach will still be if we have any questions for him. Councillor David, the leader. You wish to speak.
Apologies, I think the point has been made by Jill. Give some charge fees and charges, marriage fees, etc. A lot of them are set independently of the local authority, and we don't have direct control over some of those fees. But Jill has answered that point now. Thanks, Chair.
No worries. I thought you'd bring you in then as you're on that point. Councillor Voice, you've requested to speak. So I haven't forgotten.
Thank you. I'm going to have to go to planning in a minute, so I'll try and keep it brief.
Same.
But I'd like to agree with what Hugh said about fees. I think it's very dangerous if we don't increase fees, because it'll have two consequences. One, that it'll create a hole somewhere else that has to be filled. And secondly, when we do have to increase fees, they're going to have to increase by larger amounts. And, you know, by keeping it to the minimum, it still is an increase that will help with the overall budget. And you can, you know, if you want to pay national living wages and everything to everybody, it's got to be funded, and you know, fees are one of those ways. So I do feel that we should take the recommendation for the fee increases. The second point, and I don't want to go over old ground now, is regarding the timing of this meeting and the ability to actually have a subsequent meeting. I think that part of the recommendations should be that for next year, that the time between this meeting and the requirements to put the recommendations and the budget through leaves enough time within the legal framework to actually call a second meeting, so that you know, we have that option if we so desire it. Because at the moment, it is not really great that actually we can't have a meeting after this if we wanted. Basically, those are the 2 points I'd like to make, and I do apologise, I'm going to go now and get ready for planning.
No problem, thank you, Councillor Vice. Just on the point about the...
I'm conscious that lots of people will be leaving for planning shortly as well.
Yes, I know. I'm just going to finish this point and then we're going to move on. Just on Councillor Voice's point, that the problem is because Westminster were late, so we had to be late, and from a scrutiny chair's point of view of when we had to organise these meetings. So yeah, the timelines didn't allow it, as the Chief Executive said, so I think it's understandable, but this is a this year problem, and hopefully, and something that will be rectified in 2022. Oh yeah, 2022 when we do this again. Councillor Spanswick's comment, I'll just leave that there for people to read. I don't think I've got no one else coming forward, Meryl, with anything else.
So no extra information for comms other than the one discussed for comms one.
Yeah, I don't know if Councillor Gifford wants me to. Zach wants to speak. If he's brief.
Yeah, very briefly, is just going back to Councillor Nora Clark's point. I thought I might as well cover it off whilst we're still in the meeting. I just checked on the street lighting figures. It is near as damn it, 3,500 left to do out of 20,000. So
thank you, Zach, for that.
There we are.
Very expedient.
Yeah. Very, very much so. Thank you for that, Zach. Yes, no extra information coming from comms by those little bits that we asked for. No, I'm not. No
so I just don't want to finish this meeting before we know what if directors are required to provide more information for.
I don't want to adjourn another meeting and not know what we're going to do next time.
I think we need to move on to the education ones and just check that no members wanted anything extra on those for Monday.
Yeah. Councillor Gifford, do you want to take over? Or you just
very happy to take over. And
go for it.
Thanks, John Paul. From my perspective, unless I missed something in yesterday's meeting, I don't think there were many concerns relating to education specifically, but I'm very happy to be proved wrong if someone would like to come in and speak on that. So, Councillor Green.
Thank you. My one concern that I had ringed here from yesterday was the reduction in the cognition and learning team. It's 61,000. I am concerned that what all it's got is reduction in support for a vulnerable group. I am concerned what impact that will have. I would like to have that explained.
Certainly. Okay.
Which point was that?
EFS 3.
EFS 3.
Page 41.
Okay, is that all right, Meryl? Got that?
Yes.
Brilliant. Oh, okay. Councillor Walters, then, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question goes back to the school transport and the pressure that is within the the pressure that's been put in within the budget, and if there's any way that that pressure could be reduced by increasing the by increasing the safe routes for children to walk. So it's really a case of understanding how much that could be reduced. I did have a look at the Cabinet report that was out in September, and I couldn't actually see in there the costs that would be that would have to be increased within the community's budget, and it could well be that they're already included within the community's budget. So it's really a case of if there's anything that we can do to reduce that pressure. Thank you.
Okay, is that all right, Meryl? Got all that?
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Spanswick, then, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was touched on it. Is EFS2 is private only supervision pupils and school transport? It's only 35. It's 1% about a 35,000 saving, but the impact on health and safety is worrying. And I wasn't sure yesterday whether we had. I can't recall exactly about more on it, or whether that's a dangerous cut to make, and I think CC that needs to be reviewed further, or not being made at all.
Okay, thanks, John. And
we'll pass these back to the director. Obviously, he's not here today, and give him some context from the meeting.
And Councillor Rod Shaw, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question was SC81. If and when that's implemented, would that mitigate some of the other risks and reductions that we see on there? Simple as that.
Sorry,
thank you.
Just to be clear, SCH1, yeah?
Yeah, it's the 1% efficiency, efficiency per annum for schools. If that's implemented, then does that mitigate against the other cuts against central services? I'm greatly concerned about the reduction in central services and its effect on all schools.
Just to be clear on this one, just catching up, just one moment. So SCH1, which was a budget proposal, and this was the 1%, yes, but it wasn't in the current year, was it?
It's not in the current year, but it's in there for the rest of the forecast for this period, which goes up to 25. So my question, if that was in fact, well, you could project it backwards, couldn't you? You could say, if it was implemented in this year, could we have eliminated those cuts to central services, which all schools require? Yeah. Which is most efficient? Yeah.
Okay. I think just to clarify, we're talking like the questions were asked yesterday, and the director answered them, and that wasn't one that was coming forward this year. So we're just asking if you want more information on these budget proposals at the moment for the director to provide them next week.
That's what this is. Would that for next year, because it's not possible in this year now, but would that for next year, 22, 23, 24, 25, it's indicated in the pack. If that was implemented, would you then be able to remove EFS 6 and EFS 7? They're only a tiny fraction of that amount, but they have a big effect on all schools.
Chair, could I just come in to clarify? We are scrutinising the MTFS. It's not just next year's budget. I mean, it is the MTFS, and Councillor Shaw's question, if it was to be reinstated in this year, is a reasonable question. It wasn't asked yesterday, but it is still on the MTFS.
Yeah.
I was just trying to clarify that. That's fine. I'll pass that on.
Thank you.
Okay. Was there anyone else who wanted more clarification or anything for Monday's meeting? No. Oh, Councillor David, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to say that I think several members have referenced the proposal EFS2, and that is a proposal that we will look very carefully at, and we'll take on board, obviously, the concerns that have been raised by members, because they're legitimate concerns. So we will look at that proposal in particular, along with others that members have flagged up. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, no problem. Is that everything you need then, Meryl?
I think, given where we find ourselves now and that time is running out for development control, we need to, I'll be guided by Kelly if she's still here, but I think we need to be satisfied that everybody has identified any extra information they require. We will write that up and circulate it to directors and cabinet members, and then reconvene on Monday. And at that meeting, we need to be focused on looking at those extra pieces of information and coming up with the proposals that have to be completed, the recommendations that have to be completed by the end of that meeting, because they'll be sent out to COSC the following day. So just to be clear that to everyone, there's a very short timetable. And also the timing of the meeting on Monday needs to be discussed as well.
Okay, I'm assuming there'll be an email then, because Councillor Shaw's rightly asked about the timing for the meeting on Monday. I'm assuming the 3 scrutiny chairs will discuss that, or will an email go out? Or
I think we need to look at the people who are invited's availability as well. So we do need to look at that and to come back to you.
Okay, but members
in consultation with the chairs, yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say, but more importantly, members get an email on that as soon as
possible. Oh yes, and an appointment, obviously.
Brilliant. Okay.
But we're not going to be able to obviously do recommendations today because we have got outstanding things.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, in which case then, I want to thank everybody for their time today and for their time yesterday and for their patience as we work through this mammoth task. And thank